Hello.
Hello to you, Victor Martinez. Hello to you. I am GoatVsFish. Can you hear GoatVsFish?
Yeah, GoatVsFish. Are you about to break out into song? That's beautiful.
Yes, we have many songs of GoatVsFish. We think in these fence times, yes, we do need songs for GoatVsFish. We wonder, can they all hear us now? Or has it begun? Has the verses already begun?
Yes, we are live. People are going to start coming in. Let's go ahead and start them off with a song just to get the vibe going.
GoatVsFish. GoatVsFish is on stereo. Or didn't you know? GoatVsFish with Victor Martinez is now live on the stereo. GoatVsFish is speaking to you. We promise the verses we tell you are true. What's GoatVsFish? You haven't a clue. But it is something to do. It is something to do. GoatVsFish. GoatVsFish comes where you are, whether you're near or you're far. GoatVsFish. GoatVsFish is right where you are, whether you're near or you're far. Some say that GoatVsFish is a sham. It's true. Some say that GoatVsFish is a scam. Some say that GoatVsFish is just spam. But I am what I am. Spam, spam, spam. I am what I am. GoatVsFish with Victor Jr. Martinez on the stereo. Let's see how it goes. GoatVsFish, GoatVsFish, GoatVsFish for the first verses, for the very first verses on the stereo. Let's see how it goes. Man, girl, woman, boy, baby, person, or child. Man, girl, woman, boy, baby, person, or child. Are they goat or are they fish? Man, boy, woman, girl, baby, person, or child. This could go on for a while. While away the hours with GoatVsFish. It's GoatVsFish. It is GoatVsFish.
We are live with the GoatVsFish. How are you doing?
Well, GoatVsFish is feeling quite strong, quite mighty, these verses, yes. It is still the fence times of the pandemic, it is true. So GoatVsFish is not out there spreading the verses to you at the verse famous garage mic or at the convention or the comedy places, you know, GoatVsFish used to go. GoatVsFish used to go. But GoatVsFish is now spreading the verses through the stereo and is spreading the verses on the Twitch and is spreading the verses, is finding new ways to spread the verses of GoatVsFish.
And that's why I wanted you to come on here, because I think this is a platform that GoatVsFish would thrive.
Celebration! Celebration! Yes, thank you. We know that the fence sitter perhaps is not thanked enough by Goat versus Fish, but you fence sitter, you have always welcomed Goat versus Fish, and you kept saying, you kept poking your fences into Goat versus Fish. You said, "Come on the stereo, be part of the verses," and here is Goat versus Fish, and we thank you for insisting to Goat versus Fish that we be here, because we think perhaps they would like Goat versus Fish here. It reminds us of a versus that is called Omegle. Perhaps you have heard of Omegle. It is like the chat roulette of ancient verses. But here it is like that same verses, but you cannot see Goat versus Fish. You can see the avatar of Goat versus Fish, but you can hear Goat versus Fish. And perhaps that is enough to introduce them to Goat versus Fish.
Yeah, that is just enough. I think this is the perfect platform because they can hear this, the verses, and they can send in their verses. You can get listeners to start chiming in, whether they're the goat, whether they're fish, maybe a few fence sitters out there would join me. That's always good.
Yes, we saw that there is no goat or even only goat and fish. We saw that the ones, they can just send in communication. They can say, "Oh, hello, what is this? What is Goat versus Fish?" And then Goat versus Fish could respond to the question. Have you had them ask a question to you, ones you do not even know? Have they asked you a question in your many podcastings you have done?
Yeah, I've had plenty of podcasters where they just, they chime in, people who are just passing by, find out something interesting, and they decide to stick around, give in their 2 cents. And I think that's great. I like that aspect because it's podcasting, but the live radio part of it is a lot of excitement, especially just, if someone's a fan enough, they could just keep chiming in and you might make a new friend on here,
Yes, celebration. Yes, we need connection. Yes, the fence that keeps us separation. The fence that they say all goat and fish must be 6 fences apart. Do not leave your fence. Stay within your fence. Do not go out. Do not go out to meet any strange goat or fish. Yes, we need to connect with one another. Goat versus Fish has always been about bringing goat and fish together, and this is a place to do it. Thank you again, Victor Jr. Martinez, fence sitter.
And that's what I wanted. I want everyone to hear the word that is written and that it was, everyone needs to choose sides. And this is one of those places where people love choosing sides. If there's some type of duality, you will find attraction here. So, once you emphasize on the fact that there is only goat or fish, I mean, me, I'm on the fence on everything. And, even in this platform, in this realm, I find myself right in the middle.
Oh, well, true versus goat versus fish. We think perhaps one versus you will choose goat or fish, but it may not be for many verses. Perhaps when you are but an old fence, you are an old creaky fence, you will look into the eye of goat versus fish and you will make a declaration. Or perhaps there will just be a versus that you just can be on the fence no longer. It will simply call for it and you will choose fish or goat. But at least for this versus, for this stereo versus, we must inform you. We must be honest with you, Victor Jr. Martinez. We don't actually expect you to choose goat or fish in this versus. We do not expect you to do it.
You can't. No,
but it would not be goat versus fish. It would not be goat versus fish if we did not ask you, are you goat or are you fish?
I'm telling you, I was born on the fence. It was a really ugly scene. I was born on the fence, and I'm probably going to die on it.
The fancy fence sitter would not choose a goat or a fish, no matter how we insist. Victor the sitter would not choose a goat or a fish, no matter how we insist. You will not find a goat or fish with which to play, no. What does the fence know of the verses any old way? Yet somehow the fence sitter convinced goat versus fish to stay. It convinced goat versus fish to stay. So let's verse anyway. A sad song for a fence sitter. A sad song for a fence sitter.
It sounded sad. How have you been? So what's been going on? What can you tell me about how this fancy times have been treating the.
Ah, goat versus fish. We thought you were going to say the goat versus fish, but you are speaking actually quite goat versus fish to goat versus fish. To goat versus fish. Well, in the beginning of the fence times, when the fence times began, which was not at all like the beginning of goat versus fish, goat versus fish was beside itself with fences, yes. We stayed within. We wondered if this was the end of goat versus fish. Of course, we knew that it is forever goat versus fish, but the fence, it was fencing at goat versus fish. We wondered, is this the end of goat versus fish? Do they even want to hear goat versus fish? Is there a place for goat versus fish in these fence times, We wondered this. And goat versus fish, we thought we perhaps went. It feels like a whole entire eternity before goat versus fish went without even asking a goat or fish if they were goat or fish. That's how long it felt to goat versus fish. So we began to spread the verses on the Twitterverse, yes, and the Book of Faces and the Instantgram, and even a bit of verses on the YouTube. But the thing about that verse is what it still felt so isolation to goat versus fish. We would produce the verses all within ourselves, and of course, goat versus fish does come from within you. And so we would begin the verses and we would end the verses. We would begin the verses and we would end the verses. And we would upload this verses or that verses. And we would spend many, many eternities creating the perfect verses for the goat and fish. But then they would not so many would perceive it. Some would perceive it, but not so many. And then goat versus fish began climbing out there in the land of the goat. We began hiking out in the land of the goat. Yes, we thought we should go about. We should at least go about. And this was very invigoration to goat versus fish. But then goat versus fish, one versus got very high on the fence. Got very, very, very high on the fence. This is a true versus, Victor Jr.
Versus. We have a new versus approaching. Lady Loyalty listening, tell us, are you a goat or a fish? Please tell us. Oh, she might be gone already. Who knows? I just had to throw it out there. Please continue.
Oh, yes, of course. If they are coming to speak to goat versus fish, yes, then they should come. We should hear them, yes. So goat versus fish got very high on the fence, one versus. So high on the fence, we began wandering about in places that goat versus fish had never been, at times when goat versus fish had never been, and suddenly goat versus fish thought it could perceive things that were not goat or fish. That is how high on the fence goat versus fish was. And goat versus fish went to a place, goat versus fish, what did they call it? Some sort of emergency versus, they call it. Yes, the room of emergency went goat versus fish. And goat versus fish had to convince them that no, we are goat versus fish. Celebration for goat versus fish. No, don't take goat versus fish to the fancy place. Don't take goat versus fish to the fancy place. They released goat versus fish. And now goat versus fish has now come to accept these fence times, and through the verses of the live streaming, it has become a finer verses for goat versus fish. We no longer obsess over the perfection of the perfect procured verses. No, through the live speaking to you and through the live streaming of goat versus fish, we are coming to engage again with the goat or fish, directly with the goat and fish. They chat with goat versus fish. We answer them from goat versus fish. It is starting to feel pleasant again.
As it should. We have a new verses coming in. TV, Hood, Cristiano, tell us, are you goats or are you fishes? All the verses coming in. We want you to know. Send us in. Tell us what you are. We're trying to see who's a fish, who's a goat out there.
Yes, now is the verses. Now is the verses to choose, goat or fish.
I just want you to know how you can tell which verses have approached is up on the upper left corner right there. It says how many listeners are listening to the verses. You can click on there and it'll tell you the verses names, and we can figure out who's on whose side. I really want this to be interactive. I think it'd be really great for the verses.
Interesting verses.
Fencer, I don't like choosing sides, but I do enjoy seeing people choose sides.
Do you now? But why would you not think you would enjoy yourself to choose? You could see yourself choosing goat or fish.
I couldn't. That's the thing, is I take such enjoyment to both gaining, their numbers uh, that I know that I'm a true fence sitter. That just based off the fact that I enjoy both sides winning. You know, both either point. I'm here for the game. You know.
You're here for the game of goat versus fish. The game of goat versus fish. Yes, we were on a versus, and they said they were chatting with goat versus fish, and they were speaking of the game. They're speaking of playing the game, and goat versus fish said, "We play the greatest game of all, the most ancient game." And they said, "What is the most ancient game?" And we said, "Goat versus fish." And they said, like the username. Yes, of course. What did you think Goat versus Fish was going to say? The ancient game was Bird versus Bear? That would be false versus. Of course, the most ancient game is Goat versus Fish. It is so
Oh
surprising.
man, I
Some
really
verses, they
wish
will...
Bird versus
Yes.
Bear could call in.
Bird versus Bear, we wonder about that versus. You know, Bird versus Bear did for a versus when Goat versus Fish just wasn't looking, did commandeer the living streams on the Twitch. We are going to try with all our verses to prevent such a versus as that from happening, but you never know with that Bird versus Bear. We would not be surprised if it tried to get onto this versus just now, but for now it is Goat versus Fish. For now it is Goat versus Fish.
Yeah, maybe one day that bear will jump on and just, give us a shout out.
Why would you want to? Why would you even want to invite Bird versus Bear when you could have more Goat versus Fish? I mean, if that is fence talk, what is that? What verse could possibly come of inviting Bird versus Bear onto this stereo? It would not thrive here like Goat versus Fish.
Hey, as a fence sitter, I just like seeing the world burn.
But what of you? Yes, you have a small one. Yes, your small one is growing larger each and every verses. How is it? Has it chosen Goat or Fish?
I haven't asked. He's over there trying to get some sleep. Maybe if he comes in here at one point or another, I'll definitely ask him. But he's over
Ooh,
there.
that would be a celebration.
Rested.
That would be a celebration. Now, did you see that
he
verses of the... Did you see that versus of the Showtime documentation of the Comedy Store Los Angeles?
I have not sit down to watch that. Are you in that Goat versus Fish?
Well, it should have been Goat versus Fish. It should have been Goat versus Fish, but Bird versus Bear was there. Bird versus Bear was there. Can you believe that Bird versus Bear was on the Showtime documentation and not Goat versus Fish?
What the fuck? What are the circumstances? How'd that happen?
Well, if Goat versus Fish perceives this, yes. Well, there, you remember fence sitter Albamani, yes?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, fence sitter
Albamani. I had no idea. Okay.
Oh, it has been on the fence. Even when it produced the Goat versus Fish podcast at the Comedy Store Los Angeles, it sat on the fence for the whole versus. Oh, Goat versus Fish. It is always you fence sitters that are so attracted to Goat versus Fish in spite of yourselves.
There's always room on the fence. You know that.
Well, Goat versus Fish. So we were expecting that fence sitter Albamani would call Goat versus Fish to tell Goat versus Fish that they were having some sort of Showtime documentation at the Comedy Store Los Angeles. But you know what? Do you know what? Albamani fence sitter called Bird versus Bear instead of Goat versus Fish and said to Bird versus Bear, "Oh, they are recording some sort of Showtime documentation at the Comedy Store Los Angeles. You should get here right now. And Bird versus Bear went there because they were doing the you know the verses, the open mic. Yes, you are quite familiar with the open mic. It was the potluck, and Bird versus Bear was there, and Bird versus Bear made a submission to the potluck, and they did not choose Bird versus Bear. But just as they were looking through the fisheye lens, they were posting the list. They were posting the list to see, and they were all gathering. All the ones were gathering to see if they had made the list. And just there, as if they knew they would be looking for Goat versus Fish, there was Bird versus Bear. Right there in the verses that should have been Goat versus Fish, but they did not even choose Goat versus Fish. But pitiably, you can perceive Goat versus Fish. You can perceive Goat versus Fish in that verses.
Well, you never know what
that is what happened.
Speaking of which, go ahead and tell these new verses showing up right now. Go ahead and give them the spiel. Tell them which one they should choose.
In the beginning, there was Goat versus Fish. The Goat Fish and Goat versus Fish said that there should be goat and that there should be fish. The choosing is up to you.
Listeners, choose Goat or Fish.
What can you do? What can you do? but
Send in what you
choose.
are. Please tell us. Give us a little DM, whatever the fuck. I don't know. A little ditty they've been called. Tell us, what are you, a goat or a fish? Whoever's listening. Shout
Yes,
out to the
yes,
listeners. We need to know what you are. You could
yes,
also
yes,
be a
yes.
fence sitter like me.
No, 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 do not listen to that versus. No, no, choose goat or fish. Choose goat or fish. Do not be so intimidation. We know that goat versus fish is a very powerful versus, but do not be afraid to send a little ditty to goat versus fish and to Victor Jr. Martinez and to say what you think of the goat or what you think of the fish or to simply say, what is going on? I do not understand. You can say that as well if you wish. It is up to you.
Yeah, we have to tell them constantly what's happening here. And what is happening is the goat versus fish as a being has come into this realm and he's taking, he's calling sides. He needs to call an army on either side of goat or fish. Most people claim to be goats, I find, because they think a goat is an acronym for something great or something like that. But some people are fish because that's very, what do they call it? I don't know. There's a lot of people who are fishes even before they started asking the question. But yeah, we need to know. I want to know. I really want to know how many goats out here, how many fishes out there. Every time we get a new listener, I'm going to remind everyone to send in and let us know what you are.
Yes, yes. With each new listener, again the verses, again the verses. This is not unlike the standing up comedy of goat versus fish. Some verses they say, goat versus fish. Are you ever going to do a versus that is not goat versus fish? You are just saying goat versus fish, goat versus fish, goat versus fish. But for all of you who have heard goat versus fish so many times, there are so many more still that have never heard the first verses of goat versus fish. Have you felt this way about your own fenciness, about your own stand fence, your own sit fence comedy, that you must repeat your verses. You must repeat your verses because you never know who has heard them before.
That's fair enough. That's the point of polishing something off and, sharpening it to the point where it may be old to you, but it's strong for a reason. And it's the new time. It's every day it's the first time for someone to hear the verses.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Are you goat or fish? Send a message, send a ditty, whatever it is they're calling it on stereo. Send it in. Send it in. We are waiting for you. We are waiting for you, Victor, Vic. That is not Victor Martinez Jr., but some other Victor that makes some sort of reaction to goat versus fish. Yes, a reaction. Yes, we reaction. And Thomas Anonymous, yes, you are being very anonymous with goat versus fish. Anonymously not being a goat, anonymously not being a fish. Let us hear from you. Lemaria _90. Welcome to Goat versus Fish. Are you goat or are you fish? That is the question.
Are you goat or are you fish? Tell us, please.
But this fence-demic, this fence-demic probably suits you, does it not, fence-sitter? You probably just love being in this pandemic, don't you, fence-sitter?
I don't know if I'd say I love being in it. I have been surprised at how well I've taken it, but at the same time, it's been like a constant state of shock. I haven't even had the time to digest everything that's happening over the past 11 months. It's like it's a movie. I'm watching this happen, which is a bit easier that way.
Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish sometimes feels so alone. There is, after all, only one goat versus fish. But you at least have your little goat and fish with you. You have that small one. Is it goat or fish? And there is another that is staying with you. Yes, yes. Could you imagine what it would be like to be all alone as goat versus fish? All alone as goat versus fish. Some verses it pities us to say it, but we envy a fence sitter such as you, who at least up there on the fence has other ones to accompany you. Goat versus fish is so alone. But that has always been the verses for goat versus fish.
Yeah, I really do want to ask them what they are. Right now, she's bathing him, so I mean, they're being pretty fishy right now.
Ah, yes, they are ready. They are so ready. Perhaps it will say, "Oh, I was just in." Well, we should let it speak for itself. Goat versus fish would not wish to speak for it. No. Goat versus fish would never speak for you. Goat versus fish won't even speak for you. You, Cassie D, who has started listening to Goat versus Fish, and Victor Jr. Martinez. We will not speak for you, but we do want to know if you are goat or fish. We do want to know, are you goat or are you fish? You may wish to say, oh, how can I answer something such as this? But we have been listening. We have been listening to the stereo. Yes, we have seen every other stereo they are talking about. They are talking about Virgos and Tauruses and Capricorns and Geminis and Virgices. So they are always talking about it. But as soon as you are talking about goat and fish, suddenly, oh, I do not know about these verses. I do not know if I want to say if I'm a goat or fish. Do not fear goat versus fish. It is just a bit of the verses of a goat and a fish.
Well, that's the thing. It's a lot of pressure, you know. Like of all the things, you know, you wake up in the morning and you wonder what you're gonna do today. You never could have guessed, and no one could have ever guessed that they have to choose goat or fish. I mean, it's a lot of pressure for the average person, don't you think?
It may seem as so, but we think that this is truly the gift of goat versus fish. You know, many ones, they go about their verses. You have seen this. They wake up, as you say. They go about their verses, and perhaps long ago they made a decision. And now every verses they wake up and they just enact the same decision over and over again without ever pondering it, without ever contemplating what it is they are doing. Goat versus fish is here to give you this verses, to once again remember what it was to have the choice, to have the true choice. This moment is yours. This moment is yours. It is not like all of your other predetermined verses, which you decided on long ago. No, this is your chance to begin a verses anew as a goat or a fish, to look at all of your verses. Perhaps you will begin to question all the other choosings that you made and realize that they too are a choice between goat and fish, even though long ago you thought, oh, I chose goat long ago, so it is just forever goat. No. Every verses you have a new opportunity to choose goat or fish. That is what we are telling you. Choose goat or fish now. Choose goat or fish now. And begin a new verses that you were not expecting. You may find celebration.
So are you telling me that you're not born goat or fish? You can choose every day?
The goat and fish. Yes, there are many ways to be goat and fish. If one says to goat versus fish, and they have, they say, I was born a goat. I am a goat. I have always been a goat. I always have known I am a goat. It is not for goat versus fish to deny that this is your true goatness. Goat versus fish is not here to deny that you were born a goat. If you understand by looking within that you were born a goat, and you come to understand, or a fish, of course, or a fish. If you understand that you were born a fish by looking within yourself, and you understand that it is so, goat versus fish is not here to deny it. But it is the ones who say, oh, well, I am a Pisces, and so I am a fish. And goat versus fish says, well, is that not just because your verse day was on this verses? Is that not the astrologist telling you that you are a fish? Did you really choose fish? Did you really choose that fish? Or are you just being fish because you are told that you are a fish? So you can be born a goat or a fish, but it is not for goat versus fish to say who was born a goat or a fish. It is for you to tell goat versus fish if you were born a goat or a fish. But you do not have to be. You can choose. You can choose whenever you wish. You can choose whenever you wish to be a goat or a fish. You can choose now, you who listen.
So how do you feel about those flip-floppers then? You know, like, oh, I was a goat last week. I'm kind of feeling fishy this week. What do you think of that?
Yes, the superimposition, yes. One can be a goat now and can be a fish later. Yes, they may change every verses. You may wake up and say, I'm a goat, and the next verses, perhaps you are a fish. Perhaps you are a fish. But it is the ones who are, yes, flip-flopping, yes, clip-clopping, yes, the ones who are just going, I'm a goat. No, I think I'm a fish. No, I'm a goat. No, I'm a fish. If the choosing between goat and fish, back and forth between fish and goat becomes too quickly to goat versus fish, then we start to see the fanciness.
You see, as a true fence sitter, I've never felt one more than the other. I've always felt perfectly in the middle. Right.
Perfect. Perfectly in the center. Oh, tell goat versus fish. Really?
Yes, like symmetrical.
So even when you go into the sea of the fish, even when you go swimming about in the sea of the fish, you are not even in that versus feeling just a little fish?
No, I feel like a wet fence. That's all.
You feel like a wet fence. Yes. Oh, goat versus fish. Oh, we think you are deceiving yourself. You're deluding yourself, fence sitter. To think you of all fence sitters could be in perfect harmony, sitting up there on the fence, Now, Goat versus Fish understands that you could play a game, you could make a game of the verses. When Goat versus Fish plays a game, many games Goat versus Fish have found is all about seeing how long can you stay on the fence. Yes, you try to ride the fence, you try to ride that fence, but they all fall sooner or later. Or perhaps they triumph the fence, perhaps they conquer the fence and they balance, they find a balance, yes. But to say that you are imperfection, fence sitter, that is a very fancy thing to say to Goat versus Fish. Where did you find such perfection? Were you born perfect? Were you born perfect, fence sitter?
I was born equilibrium on this fence. I honestly, I don't lean. I don't have any bias in me.
You Goat versus Fish. You have no bias. You say you have no bias to Goat versus Fish. So how do you, who does not bias itself towards Goat or towards Fish, how do you perceive the verses all around you? How do you perceive the universe? Tell Goat versus Fish from a place of no bias towards either Goat or Fish. Is this to say that everything you perceive is the true verses?
It's just that, it's a hard card to be dealt, quite honestly, because it is kind of lonely. But at the same time, you can see the beauty in both sides, and you're not blinded by any, just direction, any hoof, any fin. You can hold them both with both hands. And that's what I like to see myself, right in the middle.
Well, we think, and we have seen this of many fence sitters, that they are leaning very far, but because they have always been leaning so far, they just think, oh, this is the center of the fence, because that is where they are used to sitting. They do not even see. They are blinded by their own unevenness to think, this is uneven verses, but you look at them and they are quite askew on the fence. They are quite askew on the fence, but they know none the verser. They know none the verser. You do not even think that this could be you. You are so certain that you are in the center, that you are balanced on the fence and not leaning one versus or another. What would you need to see?
Built so good. My fence has good foundation that it will never lean. Shout out to the 5 listeners. Tell us, give us a call, give us a ditty. Are you fence? Are you goat? Are you fish? You're probably not a fence. It takes a lot. It's not easy. Oh, I think I hear my son coming. I'm gonna find out what he is. Oh, maybe not.
You said the fence was built for you. You said the fence was built good for you. We know the verses. You know the verses. You say the fence was built. Well, then how was the fence built? How did the fence on which you sit get there? It was built. Was it built by you?
The fence has always been there, just like the verses has always been there, wouldn't you say?
Well, of course, the verses has always been there, but you are the one who claimed that the fence was built. You said it. Well, if the fence was built, then how did it get built then?
It was built, during when the verses was around. Oh, River, what are you? Are you a goat or a fish?
Can I join your show?
Yeah, you're on the show right now. Tell them, are you goat or fish?
Are you goat or fish?
Which one are you?
I'm goat.
You're a goat?
Yeah.
Celebration for goat! Celebration for goat!
Is mommy a goat or a fish?
Fish.
You think mommy's a fish? Why would she be a fish?
Yeah.
Daddy.
I'm on the fence. I'm in the middle.
What do you think, Daddy?
Why is mommy a fish?
I don't know.
I don't know, but why are you a goat then? Why are you a goat? Tell us.
Big eye.
You like goats? You like their horns?
Yeah.
Their horns are cool, huh? You want a horn like goats?
Yeah.
You want to climb on mountains like goats?
Yeah.
You like eating grass like goats?
Yeah.
Say hi, goat versus fish.
I go for the fridge.
Hello, goat. Hello, goat. We are so pleased to hear that you have chosen goat. That was a very brave verses for you to do. That was very brave for you to do. We celebrate you. We celebrate River the goat.
You, you're the goat. You're the
Celebration
goat.
for River the goat. For River the goat. Yes.
You don't want to be a fish? You don't
Though
like fish.
River the name is a body of water, just all the same. Just all the same.
Yeah, your name is like water, but you like goats, not fish.
River the goat, it is nice to meet you. There are so many more verses yet for you to do.
Yeah, verses, one or
To
the
a
other.
young goat as new, all the verses are new. And we say, how do you do? River the goat, we say, how do you do? We say, how do you do?
Say goodnight, goat versus fish.
Goodnight, go for the fish.
Okay, go
We shall
on.
see you, River the goat. Celebration,
Go lay down,
pleasant
go meet me.
dreams of goat and fish.
Good night, little goat. I didn't know you were a goat. Maybe you'll be a fish tomorrow.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm surprised. I have a goat in my family. Look at that.
Wow, what an auspicious verses! What an auspicious verses this is! It did finally happen. It did finally happen.
Look, you see that? That's what happens whenever, as a fence father, you'll be a fish tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay, good night. I love you.
I'm just the one to do you so do.
No, it's time for you to go lay down. Bye-bye, little goat boy. Yeah, you know what? See, I'm a fence, and I raised a goat. Who knew? How could you have guessed that? I'm surprised.
Goat versus fish would not have known. How does it feel? How does it feel to be a proud fencer of a young goat?
You know what? I am proud because at the end of the day, what I really wanted was to see what he would be without my influence. That's sort of like the most exciting thing about being a parent is like what they're going to turn out to be without my say, without my approval or disapproval, just genuine character, you know? And that's fun. That's fun to see blossom. Every single day is a new thing.
That is a very wise verses. That is a very wise verses. For a fencer, of course, yes. Goat versus fish too wants to see the goat and fish to choose for themselves. It is pleasant that it did not look to you. It did not look to you and say, well, what do you say that I am? No, it chose for itself. It chose for itself.
That's right. I mean, you know, it's an easy question enough. You know, you don't have to think too much about it. Just whatever your brain says, whatever your heart says, you just go with it. Whatever comes out of your mouth, that's what you are. And there's no reason to think about it. There shouldn't be any thought, really. It's just what you are, you know.
Some do enjoy to think about it, you know. Some really enjoy to think about goat versus fish and if they are a goat or a fish. And this is also pleasant to goat versus fish. To think about yourself. Yes, to think about yourself.
And you know, and I want all the listeners to think real deep inside, what are you? And please tell us. Give us a call. Tell us what you are. I want to know. We got 4, 2, 3 listeners in and out. Are you goat or are you fish?
Yes, this would not really be a stereo versus of goat versus fish. Of course it would be, but yes, we want one. We want one. We want to hear you. We want to hear what you have to say to goat versus fish. Tell us if you are a goat or a fish. Tell us if you are a goat or a fish.
I mean, honestly, it's just a numbers game. Once this versus goes on long enough, people will choose. And so far, goat's winning, I'd say.
Yes, there is one for goat. The goat is triumphing. The goat is triumphing. River the goat. Who would have thought River the goat? You would think River the fish.
That's the way life is. I find that there's duality, there's yin and yang, and that's, you know, that brings balance to the force. You know, you need a river that is goaty. You need a mountain that is fishy. You know, things in that sort.
Oh, goat versus fish. You know, there has been one other ongoing goat versus fish. There has been. It has not just been the fence-demic, you know. It's not just been the fence-demic that has been concerning goat versus fish. Have you seen, fence sitter? Have you seen how all of the goat and fish are consuming themselves with this petty, false political verses. All these verses. Oh, they all want to vote for this fence sitter. They want to vote for the fence builder. Or they want to vote for the one that is sitting on the fence, or that is speaking out of both goat and fish at the same verses. And they recently had some election where they were all presented with some sort of false choosing, and they said, oh, you must choose between these two, and they were not even declaring goat or fish. And now that the verses has ended, it seems the verses has not even ended, because the ones that they say did triumph, the ones they say did not triumph, they both claim triumph. Goat versus fish. What do you think of all these petty political verses going about that is not goat versus fish, but that actually is goat versus fish, and they do not comprehend that it is goat versus fish?
Well, I'll tell you verses. Every listener, you need to cast your vote right now. Go ahead and cast your vote. Send us in. Tell us what you are. Tell us if you're a goat or a fish. Tell us why. Please, all three of you, tell us why you're a goat or fish. I like the parallels. I think it's ironic. In every realm, every system, every verses you find, whether it's political or animal or spirit, that people find that you have to choose a side, and that being a fence sitter or a third party voter is throwing a vote away. In your opinion, being a fence sitter is a waste, in the same way that people who find, third party voters a waste, don't you think?
Well, goat versus fish, it is goat versus fish. Well, you are sitting your waist and your very voluptuous rump on the fence. That is true. There are some verses of the fence that are more wasteful than others. You being here speaking with goat versus fish, at least you are not entirely wasting your fancy verses. At least you are not entirely wasting it because you are spending it with goat versus fish. And some verses, they can sit on the fence. Let goat versus fish tell you a verses of a fence sitter. We were having a verses on the twitch.tv/goat versus fish. And for the whole verses, there was this one fence sitter, And then it got to the end of the verses, and there were 5 goat and there were 5 fish. And then the fence sitter said, now behold the power of the fence. And in the final verses, when it was even between goat and fish, just at the last verses, the fence sitter said, I am a goat, and it was the goat that did triumph. So it bided its verses right there on the fence. And then in the final verses, made a goat's declaration. Yes, this was not such a wasteful verses for the fence sitter.
Nothing is. I don't think there's any real waste, but it's funny to see the opinions of those who think that there's a right or wrong way to do the verses. And shout out to the 3 listeners. Y'all really need to cast in your vote. Tell us which you are, goat or fish. Please do. Just call in. Tell us what you are. Right now, so far, we have 1 goat, 1 fence. There have not been any fishes tonight. What do you think of that?
Well, we think we need a fish. It is pleasant, of course. We celebrate River the goat, young River the goat. But come, if you will not do it for goat versus fish, and if you will not do it for Victor Jr. Martinez, call into the StereoVS. And be a fish so that River the goat, it is dreaming now. It is dreaming of versing a fish. But who will be the fish? Perhaps it is you. You who listen, perhaps it is you. Yes, call in. Tell us if you are fish.
Yes, please send a ditty. Tell us what you are, goat or fish. Tell us why. Or maybe, you can't figure out what you are. Tell us why you can't figure out what you are. Tell us what you're thinking there. Why you don't even want to choose. I understand if you don't want to choose. I get it. It's kind of scary to just, throw yourself out there, say what you are. What do you think about the goats and the fishes that choose to be unanimous or anonymous?
You mean the ones that are listening now?
In general, like if you come across someone and you ask them and they don't want to say, but that they have a side, like that, you can tell.
Yes.
By looking at them, you can just tell that they're kind of scared to say. Sometimes it's hard to come out of this fishy closet, this goaty closet.
Well, as long as they have chosen within, that is the first verses, of course. Right. Before even declaring if you are a goat or a fish, if you wish it to be a true declaration. First, there is the verses within. You know this, you struggle with this yourself, fence sitter. There is the verses within, and you must look deep within yourself and determine who does triumph in the verses within, the goat or the fish. Now, if one does not wish to declare that they are goat or fish, then goat versus fish will not declare it for you. Even if goat versus fish can perceive within you and see that you have made it chosen. Goat versus fish does not claim to know if you are a goat or a fish until you announce to goat versus fish that you are a goat or that you are a fish. So if they do not wish to say to goat versus fish if they are a goat or a fish, goat versus fish will be patient with you. Goat versus fish has all the patience in the universe. We have asked, and this is true verses. Goat versus fish is not just some verses on the stereo that has been here and only 3 have heard of goat versus fish. Truly, Goat versus Fish has been to so many places and so many conventions and asked thousands upon tens of thousands of ones. Are you goat or are you fish? We have asked it to so many. And Goat versus Fish, when they are feeling shy around Goat versus Fish, then Goat versus Fish will be shy to them. We do not wish to be overbearing as a bear, a goat, or a fish. We do not wish to be overbearing to them, no, to come at them. That is more of a false versus for bird versus bear. Bird versus bear will become quick to anger with you and will imposition itself upon you. But if you move away from goat versus fish, then goat versus fish shall move away from you. Yes, it is a dance. It is a dance with goat versus fish. Goat versus fish is a reflection of you. So if you are feeling shy to goat versus fish, then goat versus fish will be shy with you. And if you are feeling strong with goat versus fish, then goat versus fish will be strong with you. We must let them, to answer your verses in plain goat versus fish. All the goat and fish wish to engage with goat versus fish in their own verses, and it is up to goat versus fish. I am goat versus fish. It is up to goat versus fish to recognize the way they wish to engage with goat versus fish, and to engage them as goat versus fish in that way.
Okay.
So we do not fault the ones who listen. We do not fault the ones who listen, who are perhaps feeling shy to say if they are goat or fish. We do wish you would diddy your way to saying if you're a goat or fish, or to ask a question to goat versus fish, or just to say, what is this? But we are patient with you. You may verses whenever you are ready. Whenever you are ready to verses with goat versus fish, we will accept you. We accept you as you are.
Candace, what are you, a goat or a fish? She won't tell me. How long has the verses been going on? I mean, I know it's been going on forever.
Yes.
But what is it, like 2016 with this, with the Michael?
Goat versus fish? You are speaking to goat versus fish. What did you just say?
I am.
Goat versus fish. Yes. Goat versus fish. Yes, goat versus fish has been spreading since the first open mic. Yes, of course. In ancient verses, it was goat versus fish. That versus is true. But goat versus fish, yes, perhaps for yes, what you are calling 2016 or 2017 or some such verses. Yes, it has been that long for goat versus fish to spread the verses in this way. Yes.
Well, I tell you, I can only see the verses getting stronger. It's in the air, you know. Everyone's getting more and more divisive, and I think there is always going to be a place for the verses, and I can only see the word getting stronger and the written, what has been written being, you know, versed more and more. And, you know, I'm just glad it's still here. I'm glad the verses is still growing strong. That's all I want to say.
Well, thank you. Yes, thank you for welcoming and recognizing this about goat versus fish. We are pleased that you are seeming to be sounding strong in your own fenciness. You know, goat versus fish cannot wait. We just cannot wait until the end of the fence times. And they all gathered around the Comedy Store Los Angeles, and they said, It is a place again, it is a place again, and then out from the verses, out in the verses comes Goat versus Fish. And the ones who are pleased to remember Goat versus Fish, they say, "Oh, Goat versus Fish, we are so pleased that you are here again. We wondered if it would again be Goat versus Fish. We wondered if it would again. Was Goat versus Fish, just a fancy dream I had? No, it is really Goat versus Fish." And there will be others that look at Goat versus Fish and, there again is Goat versus Fish. Back into the verses again. This is no place for Goat versus Fish. Yes, it will be just like the old verses, and yet it will be a new strong verses. And they will realize what they missed in those fence times, and they were missing Goat versus Fish. They were missing Goat versus Fish.
Yes, it's true. I was missing it before I even was given the verses. It's fun, I'm glad that I was made aware of my fenciness because I didn't know what to call it. I always thought I don't know, just in the middle is what I always called myself generally. But it wasn't until I heard the word of the verses that I was sure that I was a fence sitter, and it's relieving, honestly, because it's just the best way to put it. There's no other way. It translates into my whole being, and I maybe I would have never come to to that conclusion unless I'd heard the word of Goat versus Fish.
You are saying that even for the fence sitter such as you, the wisdom of Goat versus Fish, it helps you even in your fenciness to understand yourself.
I was lost. I mean, as a person who sits on the fence, I didn't know what I was sitting on. I didn't know to call it a fence, but then I heard the word, and then I was made aware. You've been on the fence this whole time, and it's nice. It's relieving, and at least to know your place is better than to be wandering. To be in the unknown of the verses.
Even with that fence post pointedly poking predominantly in your posterior.
Hey, yeah, you get used to it.
Tell us the verses. Tell us before you had heard the verses of Goat versus Fish. You say that you did not know what to call it, but that you were a fence sitter, even in the old verses. Tell us, so we can let us be. Goat versus Fish is now going to do a psychological interpretation of the fence sitter. Yes, tell us of one of your earliest, or perhaps just a predominant fancy recollection that you have from before you knew Goat versus Fish.
Right. Okay. So shout out to the 3 listeners. You guys need to call in. Tell us what you are. Tell us if you are Goat or Fish. Me personally, I am in the middle. I'm a fence sitter, and I always knew I was. As a child of divorce. My parents were divorced at 5. I was always the mediator, even at a very young age. So I was forced to mature quickly early on and realize that my place is on the fence. I mean, my I don't know if it was my father or my mother who was Goat or Fish. I have to ask them, but I do know that they are on either side of the fence. And unfortunately, for me, I was born into the fence, and that's probably where I'll die. And I know it's not a place for everyone, and I honestly I envy them because not everyone is put in this position of being right in the middle. Sometimes it's easier to just be able to go full Goat, and I can see that it'd be a lot of fun to be full Fish, to just embrace either or. And there's something that's kind of lacking right in the middle. It's too equilibrium. There's just no extreme. There's no unfortunately, there's no radicalness to mediation, to what do they call it, diplomacy, so that's where I am.
Oh, well, that is where we hear you. You have come a long way, fence sitter. You have come a long way. In your earlier verses, when you first encountered Goat versus Fish, perhaps it was just a bit of fancy bravado, but you would say such verses as, who would want to be a goat or a fish? And no, not goat or fish. Yes, but now you are beginning to recognize that the goat or fish out there that are not fence sitters, that they do have a certain excitement, a certain jus de vivre in that chèvre versus poisson that is not to be found on the fence. You are beginning to think like a goat or a fish, putting your fence in the perceiving ponderer of a goat or a fish and seeing what would it be like to be a goat or a fish. And you are beginning to see that it might not be so unpleasant, even as you sit on the fence.
No, it wouldn't be. It's mind-numbingly bland to be on the fence because you see both sides so with the perspective so high on the fence that you understand either or, but you can never experience it.
Call in to Victor Martinez Jr. and GoatVsFish. Yes, say if you are a goat or a fish. Say if you are a goat or a fish. We are waiting for you. If you are a fence sitter,
yes, we're coming up on an hour for this verses, and we haven't gotten any call-ins out of the 36 verses. And I'm a bit disappointed. Why couldn't we get one goat or a fish to just tell us what they are? The concept is a little too new. You know what I think you do very well at versus is being on here with just like the roulette, and you just take each person one at a time and you ask them person on person, what are you goat or are you fish? And if they switch away, you'll probably see that. But you're gonna get some goats or fishes. You're gonna get them, and I'm gonna follow you, and I'm gonna be looking out to see which sides are being chosen. Oh, look, she's here again. Which are you? Are you goat or fish? She don't want to say. She's gone again.
Yes, we believe that what you say is true. Yes, as they come to understand goat versus fish, as they break the frozen sea of the fish. Yes, to break the ice with goat versus fish. Yes, goat versus fish will speak to them all. But speaking to you, fence sitter, it is perhaps not so unpleasant to have you, the fancy perspective, because goat versus fish knows that if they call in to goat versus fish with seeking the perspective of a fence sitter such as you, it will not be long before they are hearing goat versus fish and choosing goat or fish. So if you wanted to do a versus such as this again, and we are pleased to continue the versus now, but if you wanted to do a versus, to schedule a versus with goat versus fish at future verses and to ponder and philosophize goat versus fish with you, Victor Jr. Martinez, the long versing fence sitter, that would not be an unpleasant versus to goat versus fish. I mean, it is the fence times. When in fence, do like a fencer. I mean, goat versus fish.
No, I'd love that. I think that we should definitely get this to be a regular thing. I want, I want to spread the word. I want to help. I'm glad that you embrace this realm on stereo to just to spread the word. And what I keep thinking is that there should be a goat versus fish board game. I don't know how that would work.
Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish board game. Yes, it could be many ways. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish is thinking that perhaps it is one of these. Do you remember the old games where you play as a goat or a fish, and there in the middle of the board there is this giant fence. Yes. And you are sort of, as a goat or a fish, you are sneaking around the fence, and there's a fence sitter that is perhaps sleeping on the fence. It is sitting on the fence, and you try not to wake up the fence sitter as you sneak around the fence and versus. You have your little, we can be a goat and fish. We can be versing as goat and fish, but don't wake fancy. Oh, don't wake fancy. And if you do, then the fence sitter. Oh no, it is on the fence. Oh, it stops the verses. Some sort of versus. I think that could
work. It'd be great to have that. Just for families to play, to be able to choose sides. See who in the household is a goat or fish. We have 3, 4, 5 listeners right now. Please, guys, call in. We're about to be closing up soon. Tell us what you are. Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish is going to be versing other individuals later on, and I'll be listening in to hear who he finds out there. We have 3 listeners avidly listening at this moment. What are you, Goat or Fish? Tell us. But yes, with the board game, I like that aspect, and I think maybe that mixed with like Go Fish, but like Goat Fish, mixed in there, like somehow transitioning into that. That'd be fun.
Goat versus Fish did commission what they are calling, you have perhaps heard of this versus of tarot. Have you heard of tarot?
Oh yeah, that would be great. I'd totally own a deck of Goatfish Tarot.
Yes, Goat versus Fish. We need to prove to them that it is Goat versus Fish. And the first versus Goat versus Fish did commission but one card for Goat versus Fish. But 1 card for Goat versus Fish. And do you know which one? Do you know which one it was? It was. Can you guess which one was the first commission from Goat versus Fish?
I don't know off the top of my head.
It was what they call the Fool.
Ah.
Some say it is the highest of all the verses. Some say it is the lowest of all the verses. Some claim the Fool is a goat. Some claim the Fool is a fish. Some claim the Fool is a fence sitter. But it is not the Fool. It is not the Fool. It is Goat versus Fish. But we think Goat versus Fish will just be all the verses. Goat versus Fish will be the hero font, and Goat versus Fish will be the Fool, and Goat versus Fish will just be every verses. And it will all be Goat and Fish. And I have the 6 of fishes, and I have the 4 of goats, and I have the 3 of verses, and I have the 2 of fences, and the verses they just make themselves. Of course, it was always Goat versus Fish. It is not that we want to make tarot into Goat versus Fish. Is that we want to demonstrate through the power of Goat versus Fish that tarot was Goat versus Fish all along. We have a message. We have a message.
Yes, go ahead. Press it.
A Capricorn is a goat fish. So are you a Capricorn? If anybody's a Capricorn, they can be a goat and a fish. Because that's what a Capricorn is, a goat fish. Fish, goat, mermaid, goat fish thing.
Oh my God, my mind has been blown. Is a Capricorn both, really?
Goat versus Fish. As old as Goat versus Fish, there has always been the ones that say, but what of the Capricorn? But what of the Capricorn? First verses. The verses that Goat versus Fish is going to say, they may seem harsh to you, Queen Machete. But first verses. Thank you for this ditty for Victor Jr. Martinez and Goat versus Fish. Thank you for asking this very pleasant question to Goat versus Fish. Celebration to you. Celebration to you.
So what would you say? Is there such a thing as being both goat and fish? What do you think, Versus?
Goat versus Fish. The Capricorn. It is a perennial fence sitter. It is a perennial fence sitter. It thinks it can be both goat and fish simultaneously in the same verses. It thinks it can be both goat and fish. Now, of course, for your fanciful imagination, for your mythological verses, yes, we can dream of what it would be like for something to be both a goat and a fish in the same verses. But the other verses, the harsher verses of the Capricorn is as this. What they say of the Capricorn, just like all the other astrologies, is they say, you were born on this verse day, you were born on that verse day. So they tell you are a Capricorn. They tell you. But with Goat versus Fish, it is for you to choose goat or fish. You are not beholden to this fanciness of the Capricorn. Goat, fish? It is for you to choose goat or fish. You can choose goat or fish with Goat versus Fish. And that is the verses of Goat versus Fish.
I agree. I think that everyone is both born a Capricorn, goat, and fish, and that they have to choose. On that same note, I'd say as a fence sitter that they are not a fence sitter. A true fence sitter as a fence sitter is someone who is in the middle and neither. Like not both, but neither. Okay, that's what I am, and I'd have to say that I'm neither goat nor fish, not both, but in the middle, not both.
Well, now you are just claiming to be Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. The goat fish is both goat and fish, neither goat nor fish. The unity and disunity of goat and fish. You hear the fence sitter? Listen to it, fence sitter.
I am not a unity.
Your fellow fence sitters, they are laughing. They are laughing. Oh, we have seen this many verses before. It is always the fence sitter that says, "Oh, I'm a fence sitter. I'm a special fence sitter." But deep within the fence, it is really actually a desire to be goat versus fish. They want to be goat versus fish.
No, there is only one versus, and there's only the as a true fence, it takes one to know one. I'll say that.
May Goat versus Fish sing a celebration for Queen Machete that did make this calling to Goat versus Fish.
Let's go ahead and hear these two other ditties real quick before they get old. Let's see.
Goat versus Fish.
So you really are talking about tarot? Well,
oh shit, that's gone. Okay, so something about tarot. Here, go ahead.
Goat versus Fish. Excuse Goat. But there is another. Let us another. Perhaps it is the same verses. We cannot hear it again.
That first one was gone, but go ahead and play this one. You play this one.
A true fence sitter is Libra, and their lack of a fucking spinal cord.
Damn. Okay. All right. That hurt. That kind of hurt. Wow.
Oh! What is this new Goat versus Fish? What is this new Goat versus Fish?
That kind of hurt.
Oh, fence sitter, spineless fence sitter, Victor Jr. Martinez. Are you what they call a Libra? Are you what they call a Libra?
Is that what I am? You know what? I don't.
Goat versus Fish does not know, but is that what they call you? Is that what they call you?
It'd be fair to call me spineless. I don't like that, but it'd be fair. Ouch! Oh God! Ow!
Queen Machete just laying down the verses, It is the Libra that is the true fence sitter. Wow, just calling out fences, goat ways and fish ways. Wow.
Yeah,
Queen Machete.
Spine, we have feelings.
Queen Machete, you'd better get ready. Queen Machete says to you, well, you'd better get ready for the Queen Machete. Yes. Dishing out fences left, ways, and right. Oh, it will call a Libra spineless, all right.
All right.
And if you think that Goat versus Fish is a blight because you think that it is all right to just say to any which way, to any which goat or fish, that they are spineless fence sitter, well, that is Queen Machete. Get ready, goat and fish, for Queen Machete, who we still don't know if they are goat or if they are fish. Follow Goat versus Fish. Follow Victor Jr. Martinez, and we are always prepared. We are always prepared to accept your verses with Victor Jr. Martinez and with Goat versus Fish.
Yes, there is still time to send in your verses. Please let us know. Queen Machete has been very, true to her name. She cut right through me as a fence. She cut through this fence. But, I mean, we have 6 listeners right now. Tell us what your verses is. Call in. Are you fish or are you goat? Tell us why. Queen Machete is apparently both and kind of mean.
You are just... Listen to this fence sitter. This co-verses, this co-fence. Victor Jr. Martinez is saying, oh, I am so balanced here on the fence. I am balanced on the fence. I am balanced here on the fence. I do not lean that way or that way. And I just stay and I just stay. And then along comes Queen Machete with the cutting verses. Libras are spineless. And then, it was knocked off balance. It cut right to the heart of the fence sitter. Wow. Amazing verses.
Yeah.
Goat versus Fish would never be so cruel, but when fence on fence violence, you know how it can be.
That was definitely fence on fence violence. Like, I feel hurt. I mean, my fence is still unleaning, but definitely there's a hole in the fence. All right, that hurt.
I'm fixing a hole that is in the fence that stops my mind from pondering if I'm goat or fish. Yes. Send to Goat versus Fish. Send to Goat versus Fish. Oh, there is a new verses. There's a new verses.
Go ahead and click it, versus.
What do you think? Do you think it is Queen Machete again? What do you suppose?
We'll see. The 6
Goat versus fish.
Well, first of all, I wish I could have recorded that song because I loved it so much and it means so much to me. So thank you for the song. Second of all, I'm Capricorn dominant. So if I had to choose between being a goat or being a fish, it's difficult because I'm an Aries sun, which will lean itself more towards the goat side, but I'm a Pisces Mercury and a 12th house moon, which will lean itself more towards the fish side. Definitely a fence sitter, or a blended, I don't know. I'm goat and fish, so there's no verses unless you're talking about me versus me, I versus I, which is definitely a thing as well.
And like I said, you are not a fence sitter, Queen Machete. You are a both. I mean, that's for you to decide. But as you know, being here on the fence, I don't see you on the fence. I'm gonna go ahead and throw that out there.
Yes, but what about well, that is your fancy perspective. Listen to Goat versus Fish. Listen to Goat versus Fish. Now, first versus, you began speaking to Goat versus Fish. You know, when Goat versus Fish goes about spreading the verses of Goat versus Fish, as we do, some say we can be speaking of, goat and fish, and the fish are versus the goat are versus the fish. We can be saying perfectly coherent verses. And then they will say to Goat versus Fish, they will say, oh, we do not understand what you are saying. All you are saying is goat versus fish, goat fish, goat fish, goat versus fish, goat fish, goat and fish, goat and fish, goat versus fish, goat versus fish. We do not understand what you are saying, Goat versus Fish. Well, when you started speaking of rising suns and moons and domination and goat, Capricorn domination, Goat versus Fish just heard, Goat versus Fish just heard. Fence. That is what was hearing by Goat versus Fish. But then you do say you do have a very wisdom verses. You have a very wisdom verses. When you say I versus I, me versus me, yes. The fence sitter, many wish to be versus Goat versus Fish, but they are only versus themselves. They're only versus themselves. And it is a pitiable verses, but it is a verses that all goat and fish must reckon with. The verses within. We wish you celebration and triumph in your verses within, and we thank you again. And final verses, if you will indulge Goat versus Fish. You know, we know that you wish you had a recording of the Song of Celebration, but you know, the verses they come and the verses they go. The verses they come, the verses they go. We live in a verses now when we wish to capture and record and make permanence every single verses. But there is something of the ephemeral beauty of a song of Goat versus Fish. It was a verses you had from Goat versus Fish. You may cherish it. And remember that it did happen.
And also, it's recorded, so you can go back and listen. You can go back.
Yes, never mind that
verses.
verses. You do not need to cherish that it was an ephemeral verses. It will be a permanent verses for you to hear again. Celebration.
Yeah, you can totally go back and listen. It's recorded automatically. You can go back to the recordings, go back to the recent talks, and you can fast forward to that point and then screenshot it and totally share that. I'm glad you liked it. Goat versus Fish is very divisive and creative, and I love all the music. We have 4 to 6 constant listeners right now. Call in, tell us what your versus is. I'm gonna step away for a second, so I'm gonna let the verses just take over. I will be right back.
Well, there is one. We do have a message for Goat versus Fish. It says it will be right back to Goat versus Fish. We wish Victor Jr. Martinez to hear that verses.
Go ahead and play that verses real quick. Go ahead and play that verses.
I love this so much. Like, you guys, this is so amazing. This is very Alice in Wonderland. You are definitely the Tea Party, the March Hare, the Mad Hatter right before you go to Told You Would. I bet you thought you were going to come on here and fuck people up and people are going to be like, what the fuck is this? Ha ha ha. But I see you. I see you, Goat versus Fish. I see you, other guy on the fence that I'm not on. I'm not even high. This speaks to my soul. I fuck with it. I'm here for it. I support it. I'm about it. I want to bring you guys to the masses. I agree with it. Thank you for existing.
Oh, I love that. Oh,
Celebration.
Queen Machete, you are definitely
Celebration.
not on the fence. All right, I'll be right back.
Thank you, Queen Machete. Yes, thank you. Yes. Ah, very merry fine verses to you. To you. Ah, very merry fine verses to you. To you. Now choose a goat or fish, my dear, and promise to be true. Ah, very merry fine verses to you. To you. Let us sing a song of goat versus fish. Let us sing a song of goat versus fish. Now, this verses, we will wait for the fence to this verses. And of course, if you are enjoying the goat versus fish and want to spread these verses to the masses, follow Goat versus Fish. Follow Victor Martinez. Find Goat versus Fish on all social media at GoatVsFish, and especially on the Twitch. And especially on the Twitch, you can find Goat versus Fish. You can find Goat versus Fish. Let us sing one of those old fangled verses. Oh, do you be goat? Do you be goat? Do you be fish? Do you be goat? Goat do be goat. Fish do be goat versus fish. Do you be goat? Do you be goat? Do you be goat? Do you be goat? Do you be fish? Do you be fish? Do you be fish? Do you be fish? Goat do be goat. Fish do be fish and do be goat versus fish.
I am back. What do fence be doing versus what do fence be doing?
What do fence be doing? Well, goat versus fish. That is for you to say, fence sitter. Let us hear what the newest thing they have to say to goat versus fish.
Goat versus fish. First of all, I'm a goat. But are you a Gemini?
Oh, wow. That's two goats tonight.
Celebration for goat, celebration for goat, celebration for goat. Aidan J. the goat. Aidan J. the goat was #1. It says there, right in the verses. Aidan J. .1. Yes, and Aidan J. 1. Oh, yes, you're in for so much fun.
I'm so happy for you to be a goat.
Asking goat versus fish if a Gemini.
That's a good question. That's a very good question.
Eagerly awaiting goat versus fish's reply. But goat versus fish simply cannot deny that we are no Gemini. We are no Gemini. We are simply goat versus fish. We are simply goat versus fish. We are simply goat versus fish. Thank you for communication with goat
Not
versus
a
fish.
Gemini. Not
Goat
a
versus
Gemini.
fish.
Go ahead and play that versus.
What is it you say? Goat
Go
versus
ahead and
fish
play
would
that
not.
versus.
Goat versus fish would not even know how to know if goat versus fish was or was not a Gemini. You know, it is. They wish to say to goat versus fish, "Oh, are you this? Are you that?" Well, goat versus fish is here to say that we are goat versus fish. We are simply goat versus fish. If you cannot accept this, if you cannot accept this, we will
That's
accept
right.
you as you are.
Fence sitters are simply fence sitters, not both.
Oh, there are so many that claim to say that they are both and that they are fence sitter because they are both. What would you tell to a fence sitter that says proudly to goat versus fish, I am both goat and fish, and that is why I am a fence sitter? You would deny your fellow fence.
I am on the highest fence. On the highest point of the fence, I can easily say that fence eaters are neither. You cannot be both as a fence sitter.
Oh, look how high on the fence. From on high, from on high, from on the highest post of the fence, I am Victor Jr. Martinez, and I am on the highest fence, and I declare that a fence sitter is neither goat nor fish. If you claim to be both goat and fish, you cannot sit on the fence with me. Oh, we thought there was plenty of room on the fence.
Not for some fucking boat sitter. That's a boat sitter, not a fence sitter.
A new message for goat versus fish and Victor Jr. Martinez.
I feel like I'm at church. I feel like I'm having a religious experience. I've done so much today, and it's been such a busy day. I didn't eat till like late. I'm like a woman that owns my own business, and it's been doing tarot readings all day and just fucking running around in meetings. And this is the highlight of my day. Like this is the best part of my day. This is amazing that I found. I hope this is something you do regularly because I will be here. This is helping my anxiety. This is clearing my skin. This is. I don't usually usually I call into people's shows and talk shit. I just cuss somebody out on some other. I thank you. Thank you for everything you are. I can't. I love it.
Always thank goat versus fish. Always thank goat versus fish, and we suppose you can throw a bit of thanks to the fence sitter if you wish, who invited goat versus fish. You say that goat versus fish, is to you feeling like it is to you some sort of religious experience, while goat versus fish is pondering what to make of this. What do you say to this, fence sitter Victor Jr. Martinez?
I just want to shout out to the 4, 5, 6 listeners. Tell us what you are. Machete has been very vocal. I want to know more about others. We've had 2 goats, 1 goatfish. I'm still a fence sitter, true fence sitter, and I just want to know what you guys are out there. This 4, 5, 5, 6 listeners, what are you? Call in right now. Don't even think about it. Just say, I am a goat. I am a fish. Let us know. Tell us.
As for goat versus fish, but what do you say? Do you agree with Queen Machete that goat versus fish is a religious experience? Is this what you think about goat versus fish?
Yeah, yes. I'm not a religious person. I don't go to churches. I don't. I think all religions are fascinating. I like hearing about their origins constantly. But it's interesting to see one of the newer religions. You're pretty new up there, like with Scientology, just so current.
What do you mean? Goat versus fish is the oldest versus in the universe. In the beginning, there was goat versus fish. Goat versus fish is a new versus. Of course, yes.
That's what I meant. I mean, there's always been a versus, but for those, it's exciting to see those here just now hearing about the verses and their opinion on it, and it is at the very least to say a religious experience to hear the verses for the first time, and I'm glad we are spreading the verses, and so it was written.
Yes, now goat versus fish, here's what goat versus fish will say to this. If you find goat versus fish to be a religious experience to you, if that is what you call goat versus fish, if that is how you perceive goat versus fish, we will not deny this verses. Some say goat versus fish is a religion. Some say goat versus fish is a philosophy. Some say goat versus fish is a comedy. Some say goat versus fish is a drama. Some say goat versus fish is nothing. Some say goat versus fish is everything. Some say goat versus fish. But goat versus fish is here to say that we are simply goat versus fish. We are simply goat versus fish, and the rest, it comes from within you. It comes from within you. Goat versus fish is all of these things. But goat versus fish has never claimed to be a religion or a philosophy or any such verses. We only ever claim to be goat versus fish, and the rest comes from within you. It comes from within you. It's true.
That's right. And to the 5 verses out there, tell us what you are. True to yourself. 6 people now. What are you? Tell us. Goat or fish? Tonight, I think the goats are winning, to be fair.
But yes, you can send a message. You can send a queen machete queen. Cutting it lean, yes. You can send a message to GoatVsFish or to Victor Martinez Jr. You say you wish this to be a regular versus. We can tell you that GoatVsFish does have a regular versus on twitch.tv/GoatVsFish. You can even see the visage of GoatVsFish. You can see the whole goatfish. They're on twitch.tv/GoatVsFish and on all the social media at GoatVsFish. So there are many ways to perceive GoatVsFish in that versus. But as for the verses of Victor Jr.'s Martinez and GoatVsFish, yes, we suppose we could make it. We shall at least do it once again. We shall at least do it once again and see how go the verses. Yes, we can commit this to GoatVsFish. Yes, let us do it at least once again. Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna do this like 2-3 times a month, and we're gonna figure out how many goats are out there, how many fishes are out there, how many fence sitters are out there. We need to know. We're catching fire right now. We got 2 verses on the line. Go ahead.
Oh, we hope one is a fish. We hope there is a fish for the goats to verses. We hope there is a fish for the goat to verses.
Oh shit, we got 3.
Oh yes.
My Libra's son feels the need to bring some balance to the situation and has decided to cast a vote for my Pisces moon. Get off the sense.
That sounds like a fish to me.
It sounded like it was going to be fish. It sounded like it was going to be fish. But
that
you
was
know
such a fish thing to say.
The verses of GoatVsFish is... We are not here to assume that you were going to say goat or fish. We just simply cannot assume you were going to say goat or fish. We need that strong fish declaration. Tipic. Thank you for this message for GoatVsFish. Wanting to bring balance to GoatVsFish.
Tell us, are you goat or are you fish? Go ahead and play these verses.
Yes, perhaps it continues. Perhaps the verses continues. Typical, just as we were about to get fish declaration. Oh, the fenciness. The next verse is for GoatVsFish.
I shared this. I didn't want to overtake your show, but I enthusiastically shared this, and I'm thinking about putting you in my Facebook group of 20K because this is the most amazing thing. Yeah, but my friends are gonna call in, so they'll let you know if they're goats or fish. We've already established that I would be interested in a missionary program of spreading the gospel of GoatVsFish because I think it's a very valid concept universally. And if people were considering and meditating on this more than other things, we'd actually get somewhere, So I really, with your guys' permission, I want to share this to the masses.
Queen Machete, please, yes, tell everyone about the verses.
Let us ponder it. Should we share GoatVsFish with all the ones out there in the universe, as if GoatVsFish has not been going around verses by verses, one by one, asking, are you goat or fish? Of course you can spread the verses. It is one of the true verses of GoatVsFish to always be spreading the verses of GoatVsFish. Yes. Do not worry about domination. The show of GoatVsFish. GoatVsFish has been here for many verses, and so as Victor Jr. Martinez, it has had many show of its own. We know how to keep the verses. If they come in and they start being too offensive to GoatVsFish, do not despair. We know how to handle the verses.
Oh, a new verses.
A new verses for GoatVsFish.
My Libra's son has decided to bring some balance to the situation and cast a vote for Pisces in honor of my moon. In your face, fence sitters, you think Libras can't decide things.
You still haven't claimed whether you're a fish or not. I'm guessing that's a fish.
We are not here to say that a Pisces isn't a fish. Do not misunderstand GoatVsFish. We are not here to say a Pisces is not a fish. We see the Pisces, we see that it is a fish. We are simply here to say that just because you were born on a certain verse day and they told you that you were a Pisces because of your verse day, we are simply here to say that with GoatVsFish, you do not have to be a fish for that versus. You can be a goat even as they call you a Pisces. It is up to you to choose with GoatVsFish. It is up to you and you alone to choose goat or fish. Just do not sit on the fence. But it is up to you to choose goat or fish. But that was clearly a fish declaration, yes? Yes, fence sitter, would you call that a fish declaration?
It sounds super fishy, but I'm going to go ahead and say it's okay to be on the fence, but you better be ready to be on this fence. Don't be on both sides. Be in the middle. Fence sitters for life. I know a fence when I see one, okay?
Tipik, tip, tip. Oh, it is not tip.1. Now it is just tip again. Interesting verses. Tip, tip. It was not TikTok. It was not talk tick. But it was. Tip, 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 tip. Wanting to bring balance to the verses. And though Queen Machete claimed that it had so very many curses, but tip, 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 wanted to declare for fish. Although we do not quite understand if it is tip that it is declaring fish, or that it is one that is with one that is declaring fish. That is another verses. You know, we would like to celebrate. We would like to celebrate that it is a fish that is versus a goat. And it is not that we do not believe you, Tip. It is not that we do not believe you that this one that you are with wishes to declare fish. And it may have its own verses for why it does not want to speak directly to goat versus fish. But, and you will understand goat versus fish, it is one of the earliest verses of goat versus fish that the ones must speak for themselves to say if they are goat or fish. We are not denying that the one you are with is with a fish. But if it is ready to say for itself that it is fish, then we will hear it. And then we will know. And then we will know that it is fish.
You need to say. You can't say, oh, I'm a Pisces or I'm a whatever. You got to say, I am a fish. I am a goat. I am on the fence. We got to know. You can't just... I understand completely. You got to say it. You got to be proud of that.
The next verse is for Goat versus Fish, hosted by, on this verse is Victor Martinez.
Acknowledge the fishery. It's okay. Pisces is the fish. All Pisces placements, they're just not acknowledging the fishery. So,
Tipsy.
Celebration! Celebration for all the Pisces fish, for all the Pisces
first
fish
of the night.
Confirmation for fish, confirmation for fish, confirmation for fish. And it was goat versus fish. There was a goat, there was a goat, there was a goat. And the goat was there lonely, waiting, aching for a fish to come in verses. And there was patience. There was goat versus fish, looking at the goat, waiting for the fish. And there was fence sitter Victor Jr. Martinez, and it was there, and it was simply looking about. And goat versus fish cried out to the fence sitter, will you not choose a fish to versus the goat and make it goat versus fish? But it just sat there, fencily. But the patience. Tipsy called in. Perhaps you are a bit tipsy yourself, ponders goat versus fish. And it did choose fish. It chose fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for the tipsy fish. Celebration for the tipsy fish.
We finally had a fish call in. It still sounds like the goats are winning tonight.
Well, with River the goat.
Most nights.
Do not forget River the goat. It may not have called in, but River the goat is part of this verses.
That's what I'm saying. Goats are winning, and there's only one fish. But I'm glad that there is a fish.
Of course, yes. Goat that are just being goat with fellow goat. It is a celebration of goat. It is a celebration of the goat. You hear the goat celebrating. But then we need the fish. We need the fish so it can be goat versus fish. It is a celebration for fish. The fish come to versus goat. Oh, it is goat versus fish.
The thing about fish is that even though there's only one fish tonight,
yes,
I could easily say that the fish odor is stronger than the goat odor. So,
you smell fish.
I smell fish, even though there's only one fish compared to the 3 or 4 goats. It's easy to say that the fish odor is winning.
Well, there are many verses. There is a verses, of course, of how many goat and fish. That is one of the truest verses of all. Yes, the true verses being goat versus fish. But yes, there is a verses of stench. There is a verses of contemplation. There is a verses of rumination. Yes, there is a versus of donation. There are so many verses. There are so many verses. Yes, true verses. If you wish to make a donation to Goat vs. Fish, you may send it to Venmo at GoatVsFish. The V of the Venmo is the V of the verses for Goat vs. Fish. And do you have a verses they could send to if they wish?
No, I'm okay, but I do want everyone to find verses on every platform. There's verses on Venmo, there's verses on Twitter, there's verses on Twitch. If you
Yes.
want to see what the verses looks like, you can see the verses on Twitch. And I'm just happy that we're getting so many verses in tonight. We've got 2 lined up. Let's go ahead and hear these verses. Go ahead and click them. Goat versus Fish. Tell us what you
I'm
are.
so happy that you both are talking tonight. Victor, it's good. Another fence sitter. And Goat vs. Fish. I was there for the primordial set. So awesome to hear you guys.
Chris is Fumagalli. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. So pleasant to hear from you. It is true. Back in the ancient verses, the ancient stand-up comedy verses, the first stand-up comedy verses of Goat vs. Fish was at that place that was called the fourth fence. Is that what it's called? The fourth fence?
Do you remember if Chris was a goat or a fish? Do you remember?
We think it was a fence sitter. Perhaps it chose goat. But for a long verses, it has been a fence. It said it was a fence sitter just now. Did you not hear it? Or are your ears so full of fences you cannot even recognize one of your own?
I've been drinking so much fence juice. Chris, tell us, are you a goat or a fish? I can't remember what you said.
But yes, you know that place, that open mic place called the Fourth Fence, yes?
I think I've heard of it.
Yes, you have heard of the Fourth Fence, yes. And yes, that was the first place that was for Goat vs. Fish. We thought, Goat vs. Fish, we have to go right into the fence. We have to go right into the fence and spread the verses of Goat vs. Fish. If you are too afraid to confront that goat or a fish that is in your verses, remember, now is the verses to find that goat, to find that fish, and to triumph. Let us hear the next verses for Goat vs. Fish.
Did this motherfucker just say there is a verses of stench? I can't. I'm about to go figure out how to, book you for party. I can't.
Yes, the verses needs to be at all parties. Absolutely.
Yes, listen, we do not know if Kim, what are they calling it? What is it? Kim what is that one they are calling? It's keeping up with the fence sitters, whatever the verse is. Yes, it has quite a preponderance of posterior. That is, we know it is probably just sitting on fences, that we would like to hear if it is a goat or a fish. They would pay that one. They would say, oh, here we make offerings to you. Please come and bless us with your presence. Oh, we just wish to be in the presence of you. Why not Goat versus Fish? Invite Goat versus Fish. Invite Goat versus Fish to your party or to your social gathering. You can enjoy Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish will ask them if they are goat or fish. You are having an office party. An office party can be a very boring place. Wouldn't it be better with Goat versus Fish? Invite Goat versus Fish. Celebration. Goat versus Fish.
Yeah, I'd say so. Goat versus Fish needs to be everywhere. Absolutely.
In all places, in all things, Goat versus Fish. But yes, true verses. The verses of the stench. Every verses. Smell a goat. Smell a fish. Decide which one does triumph. It is all Goat versus Fish. Next verses for Goat versus Fish.
Yeah, just to confirm, I'm a fence sitter. At the primordial set, I don't think I declared at that point. I know that Richie the Sea, I think, was a fish, and Amir was a goat, and I think maybe Andre was a goat as well.
Oh, fence sitter, what do you think? Just because there is a fence sitter declaring fence in the verses, then now you want to take over for Goat versus Fish? That is enough, fence sitter. That is enough fenciness, fence sitter. You had your fences. Back to Goat versus Fish. Fence sitters. Fence sitters. Thank you, Chris's Fumagallis. Thank you. We miss you. We miss to be seeing you. We miss to be seeing you out there in the comedy places. Yes, we miss to be seeing you. You know, Chris's Fumigalis, it has one of the V-shirts of Goat versus Fish, one of the shirts of Goat versus Fish, of the unity of goat and fish. It has the Goat Fish Unity versus. But for now, if you go to, you can find these things and more at GoatVsFish.com/store. If you go to GoatVsFish.com/store, you can buy stickers of Goat versus Fish. You can buy a patch of Goat versus Fish. You can buy a shirt of Goat versus Fish. You can even buy the Goat versus Fish mask replica to protect yourself from the fence-demic, from breathing in the fence-demic. Oh, you have the protection of Goat versus Fish with the mask of Goat versus Fish.
Do you have a fence-sitter mask?
No. Next verses.
Okay, so I sincerely apologize for being too much, but like, I just need to establish what I am before I leave, and I have other things to do because I'm behind. But we've established that I'm both, and that's like a thing to be? Or is it like, if you're both, like, he's saying I'm not a fence sitter because I'm not on the fence, but I'm really struggling. So I would like, if I can be both, I will be both. Is that a thing?
Goat versus Fish. Now, as for this fence sitter saying that you are not a fence sitter, that you are not even a fence sitter, for it to say that you are not a fence sitter unless you deny both Goat and Fish, well, you will have to speak to Victor Jr. Martinez about that versus. But Goat versus Fish, we know, as you listen to Goat versus Fish, Queen Machete, you know that one of the verses you find so intriguing about Goat versus Fish is the insistence of Goat versus Fish, that we remain Goat versus Fish even in the face of all fenciness. If you are going to claim that you are both goat and fish, it is the fence for you. It is a fence sitter. It is a fence sitter to Goat versus Fish. You may claim whatever you wish. Goat versus Fish is not here to tell you you cannot claim to be both goat and fish. But if you are going to say you are both goat and fish, do Goat versus Fish. Now, if you were to claim goat and you were to find a fish and together you formed the unity of the goat fish, or if you claimed fish and another claimed goat and together you formed the unity of the goat fish, that is a true versus, but it cannot be done alone. Oh no, it cannot be done alone. That is the versus of Goat versus Fish.
Yeah, I mean, he can call you a fence sitter, but as a fence sitter, I don't know, you haven't proven yourself on the fence to me.
Oh, listen, with just a bit of fence juice, you are becoming very fancy, very fancy. You see, first it says, it is just like the fence sitter to deny its own verses. Plenty of room on the fence, plenty of room up here on the fence, and now to say, prove to me you are a true fence sitter. Next verses.
Fish aren't real.
What?
They are put there to surveil us for the government. Fish aren't real.
What the fuck?
Fish aren't real. Fish aren't real. It is a denial of the very existence of fish. Fish
That
aren't
sounds
real.
like some
Fish
goat
aren't real.
shit
Wow.
to say.
It does sound like a versus of a goat, doesn't it? But you know, Goat versus Fish is so much more clever than even you know. Goat versus Fish has heard of verses. You know the ones they are calling birds. Yes, you are a fence sitter. You have heard of birds, yes?
I guess.
Yes, so does Goat versus Fish, as if a bird was a true versus. We all know a bird is actually a goat or a fish. But we have seen on the interwebs, there is a campaign that seems to be saying that birds are not real, and Goat versus Fish could not agree with this versus anymore, even if the versus was Goat versus Fish. There are no birds. There's only goat and fish. But this one is now saying that there are no fish. But here's the question. Is it denying fish, and in doing so denying Goat versus Fish? Or is this a goat that is trying to get the goat of fish by denying fish? What do you think, Victor Jr. Martinez?
As a fence sitter, I know a goat when I see one. I know a fish when I hear one. And, there's only been a few fishes tonight, but there's definitely a fishy smell in the air. And, easily, I could say easily the goats are winning. Tell us right now, 9, 10, 11 listeners, are you goat or are you fish? We're going to keep going for a couple minutes here. Please let us know. It's not too late to cast your verses.
Fish on stereo. Just look how it go. Do not be afraid to interrupt the singing of Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish with Victor Martinez on stereo. Some verses are fast and some verses are slow.
It doesn't matter what Victor thinks because I am here to snitch and tell you that is a fish hiding her identity, but she's slightly goat. She's similar to me in the sense that she could be both, but she goes over into fish by being primarily a fish, even though there is goat features. I mean, we're both examples of both, but she would definitely be more fish than I would be goat. So she's definitely one for fish. She's just trying to make you think that fish aren't real so that I don't know. Fish they can be manipulative.
Wow, Queen Machete with the verses again, calling out one and saying, do not deny your fish. Do not deny that you are a fish. I know that you are a fish. Yes, you may have goat features, but we know that you are a fish. Well, are you just going to take this from Queen Machete? From Queen Machete itself, that has not even declared if it is a goat or a fish, and yet claims to know that you are a fish? Are you going to let this versus stand? Are you going to sit on the fence while Queen Machete is saying that you are a fish? Is saying that you are a fish? Well, we will just have to see. We will just have to see. Thank you, Queen Machete. Thank you, Queen Machete. You are really invigorating this verses.
Thank you for your verses, Queen Machete. Keep them coming. You are never too much. I would love to hear some verses with Queen Machete in the future.
Goat versus fish. Well, we have three. Three more. 1 becomes 3. 3 becomes 7. 11 becomes 1 billion verses for goat versus fish.
Goats pee on their legs, though. I mean, so I'm okay with being team goat. So, because they're boss, and they like to play king of the mountain and shove each other off of shit. So I'm definitely like goat vibe, pro goat, king of the mountain, push bitches off of things. I'm just not the pro peeing on the legs part if there are masculine goats in the vicinity.
I'd have to say, Itzano, you could be the one goat that doesn't piss on its own feet. That's okay.
It is a true versus of goat. There are many verses of goat, but there's something we can learn from. It's now. Now is the verses of goat. It is now. Thank you, it's now. It's now a verses of goat. It's now a verses of goat.
Goats are winning.
Oh, I do not want to pee on my leg. Oh, no. I beg. Oh, no. But even though it did not wish to pee on its leg, even though it still chose goat. It was a proud goat. It was an amazing goat. It's now. Goat. Yes, and the goat are triumphing this versus. Listen to the wisdom of this goat. It recognizes that there are some things about being a goat that are not always so pleasant, but it knows it is a goat, and it celebrates that it is a goat, and we celebrate you, goat.
We got 5 verses. Oh my God.
5 verses. Follow Goat versus Fish. Follow Victor Martinez Jr. The verses are yours. Next verses.
I will slap you with my fish the next time I see you, Queen Machete. Bet, bitch.
Oh, shit.
Verses declared. We thought you were a goat, and now you are saying you are going to slap it with fish. Fence sitter, what do you make of this?
I think that a goat would use a fish as a weapon easily.
Weaponize fish. The goat weaponized the fish. Goat weaponizing fish. Wow. It says a cabal of goats gathered together and said, we are goat. We must deal with the fish menace. And then one goat says, General Goat says, what if we used the fish against itself? What if we slapped a fish with a fish? You always see how fish are consuming one another. What if we as the goat used the fish and turned it into a way to versus the fish? Powerful verses of Goat versus Fish. Thank you, it's now. Follow Goat versus Fish on all social media on the twitch.tv/GoatVsFish.
I'm neither. I'm a lion. Rawr.
Stop lying to yourself. You're just lying to yourself if you think if you think you are not a goat or a fish. But true versus. There is such a versus as a lionfish, if you have not heard of this versus.
Yeah,
goat
if you
versus
think you're
fish.
a lion, I don't know. That sounds like some goaty shit to me. Lions are goats. I don't know.
Oh, you say lions are goats. Have you ever spoken to a lion?
Yeah, lions are land animals easily. If you think you're a lion, you're probably a goat. Just putting that out there.
Yes, lions. Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, none of them are choosing goat or fish. I feel dense, I feel fancy and slightly fancy-prancy that I'm not goat or fish. You may ask all you wish, but I will never dish if I'm a goat or a fish. Lions and tigers and bears. Next verses.
I mean, if we're talking about where these animals are peeing, then technically fish are swimming around in their own pee all day, and I think that's kind of worse than peeing on their own leg. Just saying.
Urination! Urination! The entire sea of the fish was flooded with the urination of fish. Would any fish deny it? Would any fish deny it? Wow, this is an amazing verses. Did you expect a verses such as these, Fence Sitter? What would you say? A goat peeing on its own leg versus a fish swimming in the urination sea of the fish. What would you say about that verses?
Yeah, I'd say I'd rather piss on my own leg than swim in piss. Yeah, easily.
But who does triumph, the goat or the fish? Who does triumph? That is a versus. Goat versus fish has not thought of the verses of urination. No, goat versus fish. We just want you to know, those who listen to goat versus fish. They say, goat versus fish. There was such an innocence about goat versus fish. Now you are speaking of mictrication and urination. We told you from the beginning of the verses, everything is goat versus fish. Everything is goat versus fish. Next verses.
I am not Japanese, so technically it's Neo. But I understand the confusion. Respect.
Yagi versus Akana, Yagi versus Akana wa Tsuyoi versus Udayo. Kimi wa Yagi ka Sakana desu ka? Excuse goat versus fish. Excuse goat versus fish. But yes. Thank you for this correction from goat versus fish. Thank you for the correction for goat versus fish. We wish to call you what you wish. We wish to call you what you wish. It is difficult for goat versus fish. When you are not calling yourself goat or fish, you are calling yourself things that are not goat or fish. Can you really expect goat versus fish to know how to say each and every verse? Fence Sitter, do you how is it for you when one comes to you and says, hello, this is my name. I am not saying that my name is goat or fish. How do you remember what they are all calling themselves, all the various ones out there?
Itzano. Itzano in particular is a fish. Super fishy. But I'm happy that fish are being represented tonight. At first, I didn't think that we would have any fish, but now we have probably one or two fish. And the fishy smell is getting to be overwhelming as a fence sitter high on the fence.
Next verse is 4. It was 3 and then it was 4. There are more.
She would choose goat because any fish would choose to be a goat.
She would choose goat because any fish would choose to be a goat. Did we hear that verses?
That sounds about right. You know what? There's some logic in that. As a fence sitter, I can see that easily. Fishes think they're goats. It happens sometimes.
Goat versus fish. Well, goat versus fish. Queen Machete. If you are ready. Queen Machete. We are just getting to know you. And this is the first verses here on stereo from Goat versus Fish. But we are just going to see what would happen if we followed you. What would happen if we follow you? Thank you for your contribution to this verses of Goat versus Fish with Victor Jr. Martinez. We follow you, and we see, where will you lead Goat versus Fish? Where will you lead Goat versus Fish? Celebration!
Celebrations.
I always wanted to know, Goat versus Fish, where do you get your towels?
Goat versus Fish, where do you get your towels? Now, there are no towels, there are only goat and fish. There are no towels, there are only goat and fish. Why, Victor Jr. Martinez? Since the beginning of the verses, why have they always been asking Goat versus Fish about towels?
You wear towels. It's very fascinating.
What do you mean? What do you mean to Goat versus Fish? You wear towels. What is this about how you perceive Goat versus Fish?
Anybody who's seen the verses in a physical verses has seen towels.
You want me to?
I don't know. It's there. You got towels on. I don't know. They're clean.
Goat versus fish. All perceive goat versus fish differently, but yes, they're always saying to goat versus fish. What is with your towel? Oh, is this some sort of versus? What is the one they called? They saying to goat versus fish. Oh, don't forget your towel. Don't forget your towel. It is the secret of the 42 universe, or some such verses. Goat versus fish.
I feel like both a goat and a fish, but like a poisonous fish, but like a nice goat.
Cheryl Yannette says it feels like both a goat and a fish, but a poisonous fish, but also a goat. Take it away, fence sitter.
That's a fish right there. That's a fish. Cheryl Lynette, you're a fish. A poisonous fish, which is noble.
We would say it is true, though you are saying that you feel goat. You clearly have given much more pondering to your verses of fish. For you, we did not hear much speculation about what kind of goat it was that you were, but about the fish, you knew that you were a poisonous fish, and the goat tried to consume the poisonous fish. But just when the fish thought that it was going to be entirely consumed by the goat caught the poison of the fish, and it did versus the goat from within itself. Who would triumph in this versus, the goat or the fish? Thank you, Cheryl Yannette. Thank you for this versus for goat versus fish. You are so close to choosing goat or fish. We know if you ponder goat versus fish for just one more versus.
So I invited my people, and I suspect most will choose to be goats, considering the context of the population in which we are selecting and the fact that people are self-identifying. Because fish would be considered more bitch-ass than goat. And bitch-assness in this particular demographic is not selected for. Therefore, most people would argue to be a goat, or the people that I would bring to you would definitely argue for goat or masquerade as a goat, even if they are a fish. Now, I think by virtue of me enjoying this so much makes me more fish than goat, but my enthusiasm makes me more goat. So I'm both, but I'm not sitting on the fence. Maybe I fell off. I'm not sure. But just some insight about the background statistics of the population, of the sample.
Yeah, Queen Machete, you were never on the fence. But you're bringing some goatiness.
You see how Queen Machete, it leads into the verses. It comes to goat versus fish. It stands before goat versus fish and says, look who I have brought to you, goat versus fish. Look who comes from Queen Machete. I bring to thee. Oh, by the way, they are mostly goat and probably not fish. They do not self-select for fish. Goat versus fish. You may say this, Queen Machete, but we will let them speak for themselves. And we will hear if they are goat or fish. And you say that a bitch fish. You say, who wants to be a bitch-ass fish? Fish? Goat versus fish knows many fish who says, I'm a bad bitch fish. Yes, I slap you with the fin of the fish. Do not get up on goat versus fish. Slapped with the fin of the fish. Bad bitch fish. We have heard all sorts of verses.
That's the thing. People think that fish are small. Fish come in all sizes. There are many large fish.
Fat or skinny or short or tall, goat versus fish is a versus for all. It's a versus for all.
Shh. I'm an undercover fish. Shh. The goats can't know.
Your secret is safe with goat versus fish. We will not tell them. No. We know that you are a fish. We know that you are a fish. Yes. Oh, yes. We want a mighty versus. We want to mightily versus those goat. You just sneak into the goat and you give them a versus. You give them the full verses. Yes. And you can tell goat versus fish. You tell goat versus fish what the goat is versing. Yes. It will be fish versus goat. Yes. Beware the goat. Some goat with their rectangular eyes, they may try to perceive that you are a fish. Welcome to the ASMR versus of goat versus fish. It is a nice, quiet, silent versus. Yes. Enjoy goat versus fish. The sound of the sea of the fish. The sound of the sea of the fish.
Okay, are we talking like tuna? Are we talking like goldfish? Or are we talking like barracudas? We need to be a little bit more clear. There's much less of a range of goats. We need to know what kind of fish we're talking about.
That's what I'm saying. 8-edge one. 8-edge one. There are a lot of different types of fish. And you're a big fish.
This is a classic versus. Now, this is a classic versus of goat versus fish. Now we are getting into the versus of goat versus fish. Yes, which kind of fish? Which kind of fish? Well, it is up to you. If you declare that you are a fish, then goat versus fish will, of course, be asking you the next questions. Of course, are you goat or fish is the one true question of goat versus fish. But yes, if you say, I am a fish, we will ask you, oh, what sort of fish are you? How do you versus the goat? You may be any kind of fish that you wish with goat versus fish. You may be any kind of fish or goat for that versus. We are speaking of all fish versus all goat. We are speaking of one fish versus one goat. The verses, they are all happening simultaneously. It is all one verses. There are infinite verses within each verses. You want to know how long is a verses? How long is a verses? That was a verses. The verses just happened. And yet it is all part of the great verses, the mighty verses of goat versus fish. So which fish are we talking about? Which fish? Victor Martinez Jr., which fish do you wish to speak about? Let us throw a fish. Let us throw a fish into the verses. Let us hear what their opinion of a particular fish.
In my opinion, fish are really big. I mean, fish get to any size. A shark is a fish.
True verses.
You think you're a shark fish, that's what you are. All right? There's a lot of fish out there. It takes a very small fish. There's tuna fish. There's very small mackerel fish that, you know, if you're a fish, you're a fish. And even the smallest fish smells stronger than a goat. That's what I'll put out there.
Wow. Bold verses from a fence sitter. You know, usually it is being a bit more reserved in its fences, but you know, it has been drinking like a fish. And now the verses come in, the verses again.
I don't know. They're clean.
Well, okay. Thank you, Heather Pate. It sounded like the fence sitter speaking to goat versus fish. It is not too late, Heather Pate. It is not too late, Heather Pate, but we did not quite hear that verses. The fence sitter got in the way. Fence sitter, why did you ruin their verses? Why were you there speaking to goat versus fish? Why do you insist on invading the messages to goat versus fish when you could just speak to goat versus fish? Why do you do this?
Heather Pate, tell us what you are.
Fence sitters. Next verses.
Okay, I'll say this. Goat all the way. Goats are smarter than fish. All fish knows how to do is swim. Yeah.
Goat all the way, goat all the way. Heather Pate. Heather Pate coming into the verses late. Oh, but isn't it great? It chose a goat. It chose a goat before it was written, before it was wrote. It chose a goat. It is never too late for a declaration. So if goat versus fish will just be a bit more patient, we suppose we will hear more from goat and the fish. And the fish and the goat.
Verses.
I'm definitely a mountain goat because mountain goats don't fuck around and they will knock you off the mountain.
Skywalker, goat versus fish. It would be the Skywalker that is high upon the land of the goat, walking in the sky, not like a fish that is in the sea of the fish. The sea of the fish, it is deep, but the skywalking goat, high on Goat Mountain. A fence sitter such as you cannot even get as you can get as high on the fence as you wish. You will never be as high as Goat Mountain, fence sitter.
High on this fence, I can see the goats are winning, even though the fishy stench is very strong tonight.
You are really smelling that fish. Are you even bothering to try to perceive the fish in any other way, or are you just want to smell the fish? What is a fish to you? What is a fish to you? Is a fish just the smell of a fish? Is that all is a fish to you?
The strongest thing about a fish is its stench. I could say that right now.
Wow, the strongest. So you think that if a fish wanted to triumph a goat, it should use the smell of the fish. This is what you are saying to goat versus fish. What of the smelly goat? What of the smelly goat? There are so many smelly goat out there in the verses. The goat, it is peeing on its own leg for the sake of verses. And you say that it is not a smelly goat?
Goats have an earthy smell, and it's hard to perceive, as opposed to a fish, which is, I mean, god damn, these fishes are stinky.
Skywalker, thank you for your high goat versus. Follow Goat versus Fish. Follow Goat versus Fish. Follow Victor Martinez on all social media at GoatVsFish, GoatVsFish.com. You can find links to all the verses of Goat versus Fish. 10 verses. Queen Machete really speaking true verses.
There's such a thing as fainting goats. But have you ever heard of fainting fish? I think not.
This is the goat. This is the goat. This is the proud goat. There are a fainting goat. Goat versus fish. The fainting goat. They say it is some sort of. Is it a defense? Is it a way that they faint? They are startled. The goat that are startled. They're such cute goat. Those fainting goats. They're such cute goat. Goat versus fish. Yes, they faint. They faint at the first sign of fish. At the first sign of fish, the goat faints. The goat faints. What do you think? Do you think this is a strong versus of goat, fence sitter?
I don't know if there's more fish or if there's more goat, but it's easy to smell fish.
We are speaking of
fish is a stronger
fence sitter.
odor.
Your ponder is becoming addled by your fences. We are speaking of fainting goat. We are speaking of fainting goat, fence sitter. Get with the verses. Fainting goat. But there are no fainting fish. Oh, the fence sitter.
You know what? Some days I feel like a great white. Sometimes I feel like a fainting goat. And sometimes I feel like a blobfish from the bottom of the sea.
The blobfish. Now that is a fish. The mighty blobfish. Goat versus fish knows a blobfish. Yes. We know one on the YouTube that is calling itself a blobfish. Some verses you may feel as a fainting goat. Some verses you may feel as a blobfish. We welcome you in either verses. Blobfish. Nice fish.
Queen Machete's totally right, actually, because I would be Team Fish. One of my nicknames in the spaces in which we roam is Mommy Shark, because I bite bitches violently with my teeth. It's true.
Wow, biting bitches violently. Wow, biting bitch goat. But you are a fish, a shark fish. Victor Martinez Jr., are you there? Are you there on the fence?
Yeah, fish are violent. Goats, compared to goats, fish are violent.
Oh, but what about the headbutting versus goat? They are always headbutting one another.
I really want to be on the goat team, but as somebody who grew up on a farm, I promise you, fish do not smell worse than goat until they're piled in a fish market. Goats are farm animals that smell like literal asshole.
You have heard the verses. It is the goats that smell and not the fish. Learn your verses, fence sitter. Learn your verses. Are you going to deny? Our faithful listener, our true faithful listener, Aidan J1? Are you going to tell this listener that it is false in its verses?
As a fence sitter.
Oh! You almost said goat.
As a fence sitter, no. As a fence sitter, fish. I can smell fish as a fence sitter. No matter how high you are on the fence, you can always smell fish.
Well, the goat are versus fish, and the fish are versus goat, and the goat are versus the fish.
I'm goat. I think I'm goat. I'm not fish. I think I'm goat.
Now, there's a lot in this verses. There's a lot to say about this verses. Nervous, Larry. You are nervous, aren't you? You are nervous around goat versus fish, hiding behind that mask of yours. First verses,
That's a solid goat. That's a solid goat right there.
Oh, but goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. It says, I am goat. Celebration for goat. Then it says, I think I'm goat. as if to say it is not so certain it is goat. Then it says it is not a fish, which is to say that, again, strongly it is goat. And then it says it thinks it is a goat again. It is a celebration. You are so close to choosing goat, but nervous, Larry. Do not be so nervous, goat versus fish. If you are going to be goat, then declare goat, be the goat, be the goat, be the goat.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm a Capricorn. And yeah, I'm always going to be goat because it's probably some bias too, but I'm just not that big of a fan of fish most of the time.
True versus never spoken. A goat, not so much a fan of a fish. And there is a Capricorn. There is one that it was said on its birthday. They said, you are a Capricorn because we say that you are. And yet it declares goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for Heather Pate the goat.
Have you guys ever like looked at a goat, like just stared into its eyes? I feel like those guys are like naturally tripping on acid.
Yeah, goats have their own perception. Goats are probably they're tripping. Goats are tripping.
Goat versus fish has stared into the eye of many goat and fish, When goat versus fish is out there in the universe, beyond the StereoVSs, when goat versus fish is out there, before the fence times, out at the convention and out in the comedy places, asking you directly, are you goat or are you fish? We would look directly into the eye of a goat and fish. They say the eye is a window to the verses. That is what they say about goat versus fish. And even though nervous Larry, even though it is merely an avatar of your presence that is sent over the intranet to goat versus fish, we are looking into your eyes now, nervous Larry. We are looking into your eyes now, and we are compelling you to follow Goat versus Fish on all social media at Goat versus Fish, and also to ask you, are you goat or are you fish? Declare goat, unequivocal goat declaration. We are waiting for you.
Oh yes, and also by goat, I second that on mountain goat. Mountain goat's the best.
Celebration for mountain goat. Mountain goat.
Goats are winning. I will be right back. Goats are.
It will be right back. We will serenade you versus. We will serenade you. Thank you, Heather Pate. Yes, mountain goat. Thank you for being part of the conversation of goat versus fish, or the part of the conversation of goat versus fish. 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 Well, we suppose that fence sitters is going to miss the verses. We wonder if that fence sitter even really cares about goat versus fish. Oh, we will abandon you, goat versus fish. We will abandon you, goat versus fish. We have more fences to attend to.
I'm literally in pain from laughing so hard. Like, I don't know what, underworld you guys are from, or if this is connected to, old white dudes in some type of way, and I just brought a bunch of Astro hoes to your shit, and we're playing in on some inside joke we don't fucking understand, but I'm having such a good fucking time. I love it. Thank you. I feel like I'm having a party with my girls, and you guys are serenading us. We fuck with you. Goat or fish, both. Fence sitters are a little bit more Libra, so I respect homeboy fence sitting, gatekeeping the fence. To me, I feel like he's gatekeeping the fence from me, which is fine. I don't need to be on no fence. I'm a big girl, but yeah, that's what I have to say as of right now.
Yeah,
it is a party of goat versus fish. It was a party of goat versus fish. Fence sitter, did you even hear that versus when you were away from goat versus fish? It says you are gatekeeping the fence.
Yes, I have to keep the fence clean. All right, listen, the fence is clean. All right, you can't be both.
Oh, my verses.
You can't be both. You have to be one or the other. If you think you're both, but you're not on the fence. The fence is in the middle.
Goat versus fish. Now, if you are speaking, what are you are wondering? Is it some old white guy thing? Well, it is one of the most ancient verses of Goat versus Fish. It is one of the most ancient verses of Goat versus Fish. There is no alpha or omega. There is no black or white. There is no good or evil. There is only goat and fish and goat versus fish. You are wondering, what is the joke? What is the inside joke? It is Goat versus Fish. It begins with Goat versus Fish. It ends with Goat versus Fish. It is Goat versus Fish through and through. You are wondering, oh, is Goat versus Fish some secret verses for some other verses that I did not know that I was getting into? Oh no, I do not know. I'm suddenly doubting if I'm a goat or a fish. This is Goat versus Fish. This is the original, the one, the only Goat versus Fish, except that we are all part of Goat versus Fish. And so are you. We are all part of Goat versus Fish. So it comes from within you and from without you and without you and with you is Goat versus Fish. Welcome, Queen Machete, to Goat versus Fish. It is a pleasant to have you here.
Listen, guys, I know you guys have heard of goat's milk, but have y'all ever had fish milk? Oh my God.
Nervous Larry, tell us about fish milk. Tell us about fish milk. It is said in the ancient tomes of Goat versus Fish that there is fish milk, that there was a fish milk, that there was a fish milk versus the goat milk.
That's so gross.
Yes, milk that fish. Milk that fish. We want to see goat milk versus fish milk. Nervous Larry, tell us all about fish milk. Tell us all about fish milk. And also tell us if you are a goat or a fish. Tell us, be goat. If you want to be goat, then be that goat. Have you ever had
that
fish
sounds
milk?
like a fish. That's so gross. He was talking about fish milk. Oh my God.
Victor, you gotta go smell a goat now. For real. Go find yourself a billy, an intact male goat, and smell that stank. And come back and tell me it smells worse than a fucking fish. I dare. I double dog dare you.
We agree. Goat versus Fish must agree. Goat versus Fish must agree with this one who calls into Goat versus Fish. You who claim to know so much about the smell of fish versus goat. Have you ever smelled a goat? Have you ever smelled a goat, fence sitter? Have you ever deigned to come off of your fence to smell a goat?
I can smell both sides. High on the fence, I can smell
there
both
is that
sides.
versus again. Yes, I can smell both sides. I can smell both the goat and the fish. You have been called out, fence sitter, to smell a goat. Will you smell a goat? Will you do it?
Goats have more of an earthy...
Fanciness. Will you smell a goat or will you not smell a goat?
Scent.
Will you smell the goat?
It's easier to deal with an earthy scent. Fish.
Listen, we know it is the fence times. We know it is the fence times. It is the pandemic, and all goat and fish are to remain 6 verses apart. But when it is no longer that, will you go? Will you go? And Goat versus Fish will go there with you. Will you go to the farm and will you smell a goat? You have been challenged to smell a goat. Do you accept or do you reject this versus?
Goats do not smell as strong as fish, no matter what.
You see the fence sitter. It will not commit. It will not commit to even smelling a goat. It will not commit to even smelling a goat. Goat versus Fish will smell a goat. Goat versus Fish will smell that goat.
You know, there is such thing as the fainting goats, but I also think it's quite possible that there are narcoleptic fish. So it's just something to think about.
Oh, it is something to think about, yes. You know, it is said of a shark fish that it is always sleeping, half of its ponder, that it is always sleeping. Have you heard of this versus?
I've heard of that. I still think fish are stronger smell. That's just what it is.
You are smelling yourself. You know that stench that you think is coming from fish? You are smelling yourself, fence sitter. It is you who reeks of fenciness. It is you who reeks of fenciness. You say, oh, that is a fish. Oh, that is a goat. You are smelling yourself. You are smelling yourself. We bet you like the smell of your own fences. Goat versus Fish.
It's pretty freaking easy to smell goat too, though. Like, you can smell goat from like a fucking mile away. Have you ever smelt a goat, Victor?
Called out again. Have you ever smelled a goat? Really, have you ever gotten your face right up in a goat and really smelled a goat? Watch it tonight. It will deny it.
A fish smell is stronger than a goat smell, Skywalker.
You are not answering. You are not answering. Listen, Skywalker the goat, the high climbing goat, has taken a verses out of its ever precious verses of Goat versus Fish to ask you if you have ever truly smelled a goat. Are you going to just build fences? Are you going to build circular fences around this verses? Or are you going to give the skywalking goat the verses it deserves verses and tell it if you have ever smelled a goat? Fence sitter. We are beginning to wonder if this was a pleasant versus even to join this fence sitter. If you are just going to listen to all the guests who call into Goat versus Fish, and you are just going to not even listen and answer to their question. Well, Goat versus Fish does not know about this fence sitter.
All right, as a true fence sitter, I've smelled fish. I've smelled goat. Fish are stinkier. Come on.
Come on, says the fence sitter. Come on the fence.
I don't know if goats headbutt each other, but rams definitely do, man. That shit's crazy, dude. They hit each other really fucking hard, man. Let's get some research for CTE and rams, dude. I think they need it.
Well, if you listen to Goat versus Fish podcast, if you listen to Goat versus Fish podcast, we are not speaking of this versus now with Victor Jr. Martinez. We are speaking, if you go to the YouTube or the iTunes and that such verses, and you listen to the Goat versus Fish podcast, you will see that Goat versus Fish had a versus with one that is called Jared Odrick. And it played professional verse ball for Goat versus Fish. Was it for the Eagles or some such fanciness? And it did speak to Goat versus Fish about CTE. Yes, we have heard about this versus the headbutting goat. Yes, causing concussion to one another. There was also that versus of LA Rams versus Patriots some verses ago. Goat versus Fish is always looking at these professional sports and trying to determine if it should be Goat versus Fish. It should be Goat versus Fish. That is a versus for another versus. But in any verses, the Rams were versus the one that is called Tom Brady, and they say Tom Brady is a goat, but the Rams have the horn of a goat, so it seemed to be Goat versus Goat. It was all fences. Have you anything to say, fence sitter?
I think the goats have CTE.
You think the goats have CTE? Concussion!
Seriously, you're saying that fish are feistier than goats? Are you kidding me? Like, goats will knock you off a goddamn mountain. Like, what? No. I mean, yeah, there's some, like, beast-ass fish out there, but for the most part, fish aren't scary.
Ooh, fish are not scary. This goat from on high Goat Mountain looks down at the sea of the fish and says, fish are not scary to this goat. Fish are not scary to this goat. It is not afraid of you, fish. The goat is not afraid of you, fish. What are you going to do? What of you, Victor Jr. Martinez? Are you afraid of any goat or fish?
As a fence sitter, goats are more dangerous to fences. They can break down a fence easily, as opposed to a fish. I'll put that out there.
But here, Goat versus Fish. You see, you think you know all about fences from up there on the fence, but what they're calling the net. You know what they call the net, yes?
Yeah.
The net is just a fence by another name. It is a fence of the sea, the net, and many fish are caught in this fence, and their verses are ended. There are fences. There are fences all around you. There are fences all around you. There are fences all around you.
Goat versus Fish forgot to mention one of the most famous goats of all time, Clayton Williams III, the mayor of Lajitas, Texas.
Goat versus Fish. You are speaking of the goat that won the political verses? Yes, you may be speaking of. Yes. There was a goat. Believe Goat versus Fish. There was a goat that ran for mayor or some such verses, and it won the verses, and it became mayor of Goat Town. This is a true verses. Look it up. Look for a goat runs for mayor or some such verses. You will find it on the intranet. Goat versus Fish does not have the portal to the interwebiverse just at this verses, but true verses, Chris Fumagalli, true verses. We believe that in later verses there was a challenger to Mayor Goat that was calling itself a dog. So they said that it was dog versus goat, which, I mean, does Goat versus Fish even have to say Goat versus Fish? So yes, mayoral goat, they should have run a fish against that goat. Then we would have had a real versus. What of you, fence sitter? Do you have any fanciful political aspiration? Just like a goat has triumphed for mayor. What have you done with your versus fence sitter?
I think tonight the goats are winning. The fishes are making a lot of noise. You know, it's easy to make noise as a fish. You flop around, you make noise, but at the end of the day, the goats are winning. I'd have to say, as a high on the fence.
I'd just like to argue that Capricorn is technically a sea goat, and therefore both.
Oh, we're sorry. Were you saying something to goat versus fish? Were you saying something to goat versus fish? Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. A goat can go to sea. A goat can go to sea. A goat can go to sea. My goat father and me. The fence sitter had to come and take us away. I want to go home. I want to goat versus fish. Capricorn, fence sitter.
I propose that since fence sitters choose to sit upon the fence and not be decisive and not make a decision, therefore they cannot be goat because goat is decisive. So I propose that all fence sitters are fish in disguise.
It's Sano, how dare you? We are not fish. We are on the fence. Fences have nothing to do with fish. How dare you?
Accusation. It is calling you fish. It is calling you fish. You know, now that we look at you, Victor Jr. Martinez, well, perhaps you look like you could be a fish. You could be very fish. You look like you could be very fish.
I don't like that. I don't like that at all. No.
Do you have any defense? Do you have any true defense? That sounded like quite a versus for goat versus fish.
That's not fair. Sano can't just say that fence sitters smell like fish. You can't just say that. That's not fair.
Well, you have been smelling fish all the verses. You have been smelling fish all the verses. You are probably smelling yourself. Fish. You are probably smelling yourselves. Listen how it laughs at you. It laughs at you. You take your verses to call into goat versus fish and to make a very pleasant verses. But if all the fence sitters became fish, then the goat would be versus so many more fish. How would you triumph, goat? How would you triumph if all the fence sitters became fish?
Suck dicks in hell, idiot.
Okay. Why, you can do that yourself. You can do that yourself. The power to suck dicks in hell comes from within you. We believe in you. We believe in you, StereoAsian. We believe that you can do it. We believe that is what you are calling yourself, and we believe that is your verses. If that is your verses, we believe in you. Go do it. Go do it. And if you're going to call into goat versus fish, you should at least declare if you're goat or fish. Next verses.
Yeah. I just want to put it on the record that whoever brought up fish milk, I want to die now. Thank you.
It wants to die now. It wants to die now. It wants to die now. Oh, but there is so much to live, so much to live for, so much to live for with goat versus fish, with goat versus fish. Be alive with goat versus fish. Let it not be ghost versus flesh. Stay here alive with goat versus fish. The verses continues. Unless you are just a metaphorical verses, perhaps. You want to die from fish milk. Very powerful verses. Fence sitter, would you rather die or drink fish milk?
I think fish milk is stinky, just as goat milk. For some odd reason, fish milk is stinkier than goat milk. I don't know what
goat versus fish. Have you run out of verses, fence sitter? The verses of the stench. What of the verses of the sound of hearing a goat and fish, and of tasting goat and fish, and of seeing goat and fish, and of touching goat and fish? What of all these verses? What of the rich tapestry verses of goat versus fish?
It's hard. You have to stay 6 feet away. It's hard to understand what a goat is from a respectable distance. But the fish sense is always strong. Are you goat or are you fish? 12 listeners, let us know.
Milk a fish. It ain't got titties. It's not a mammal.
You can't milk a fish. The fish doesn't have tits. The fish doesn't have tits. Goat versus fish would say to you, Goat versus fish would ask the fish, any fish that are currently listening to Goat versus Fish with Victor Martinez Jr. Follow Goat versus Fish. Follow Victor Martinez Jr. Listen always to Goat versus Fish. There are fish in this very verses that have declared fish. Honest verses, do you have tits, fish? This one is declaring that fish do not have tits, and so you cannot milk them. But we wonder if any of the fish that have been on this verses with Goat versus Fish, if you wish, to make a declaration to say if you do have fish tits or if you do not have fish tits. This one is saying that Goat versus Fish is saying that all fish do not have tits, and Goat versus Fish we do not know if we can accept that verses. The fish should say for itself. The fish should say for itself. What do you say? Do you agree? Do you agree, Victor Juniors Martinez?
I think fish on average have more tits. I don't know.
I actually got COVID, and I can't even smell my own farts, man. It's very depressing. I'm so sorry, guys.
It is very pitiable to hear. It is very pitiable to hear. The fence-demic, it makes it harder to perceive Goat versus Fish. It truly does. It truly does.
Yeah.
We wish you a very verses to recover so that you can once again smell your own farts and ask your farts if they're goat or fish.
Yeah. We are in a fence-demic. It's hard to tell what you are. It's hard to tell.
We are glad. We are pleased that you are still here. We are pleased that you are still here with Goat versus Fish.
So I can't talk as loudly as I did before because my baby woke up and she's 2, so I have to come put her back to bed. But one thing I did want to say is she's definitely a fish and not a goat. So if I gave birth to a fish, does that make me more fish? Or because Capricorns exist, and I just want to say for anybody who's coming on and saying, oh, I'm a Capricorn, I'm not a goat, or I'm a goat, Capricorns are literally goat fish, so no. But she's definitely a fish, my child. And yeah, so I have headphones and I'm putting her to sleep, but I just need to let you guys know, see what you thought about people who give birth to fish, if that automatically defaults them as fish.
Now, Goat versus Fish, we celebrate you, Queen Machete, for bringing all to here to listen to Goat versus Fish. And you are very confident in your verses, and this is impressive to Goat versus Fish. But we are sorry you cannot simply declare that one, even though it came from within you, it is not for you to say if it is a goat or a fish. You may have your suspicion that it is a goat or a fish. And perhaps you do have some secret knowledge that it is a fish. But the only way to know for sure is to ask it if it is goat or fish. Perhaps you think it is too young to ponder Goat versus Fish. But one verse is, it will be asked the one true question. And if it says it is goat, are you truly prepared to look at it and tell it that it is a fish if it declares itself for goat? If it declares itself for goat, we wish to celebrate the goat. If it declares itself for fish, we would celebrate the fish.
As true,
Yes.
My son was a fish, and I didn't know. No, my son was a goat. My son was a goat, and I had no idea. As a true, thorough fence sitter, I didn't know I was raising a goat. And you just don't know until they claim. You can think what you think. You think you're raising a fish. It's probably a goat. You don't know.
And as for the Capricorn out there, you can still choose goat or fish. There will never be a versus. There will never be a versus with Goat versus Fish where you are not free to choose goat or fish. No matter what they have called you before, no matter what they call you after, with Goat versus Fish, the choice is yours and yours alone.
Mountain goats will straight fuck your shit up. Like, I don't even want to hear this about no goats being weak. Like, what? No. Fish are bitch ass.
Mighty versus mighty versus. Wow, this skywalking goat, it is just getting mightier every versus. Wow.
Fish are bitch asses.
Declaration, and the goat declared that the goat declared that the fish was a bitch. Wow. Wow, goat versus fish. This is a goat to be reckoned with. Skywalking goat, really making a verse for itself. Climbing high, and from the highest peak of the highest land of the goat, declaring fish are bitch. Wow, amazing verses. You heard it from the goat. You heard it from the skywalking goat.
Goats headbutt everything. But honestly, a live goat smells really bad. Fish hardly smell like anything unless they're already dead.
Now, goat versus fish, we have been saying to you, Victor Jr. Martinez, we have been saying, oh, you are focusing on the stench. You are focusing on the stench of the goat and fish. But now they seem to be pondering this versus of the stench as well. Yes, for every versus you have of fish being stenchier than goat, another one comes and says a goat is stenchier than fish.
Goats have an earthy smell. Fish are an unnatural fishy smell.
Look, we know the goat are of the land, Victor Jr. Martinez. Tell goat versus fish something that we don't already know about goat versus fish. What is it? What is this? What is this earthy smell of which you speak?
It's like natural. Okay, goats smell like the earth, and fish smell like some unnatural fish. All right.
Are you to say that the sea of the fish? Are you to say that the sea of the fish is not part of the earth of goat versus fish?
It's got stank to it. I don't know. There's like a fishy stank.
Have you ever had a fresh fish? A fresh fish.
Yeah, I've totally had a fresh fish.
Yes, well, goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. You know the fresh fish. It smells as fresh as the very sea of the fish. The sushi, the fresh-smelling sushi of the sea of the fish.
I agree that Victor is a fish. That's why he's always smelling the fish so strongly, because it's actually him.
Versus.
How dare you?
Maybe we should just start calling you fish. Maybe we should just start calling you fish. How does that sound? How would that sound? Victor Jr. Martinez, the smelly fish, was speaking with Goat versus Fish on the Goat versus Fish with Victor Jr. Martinez stereo. What does that sound like for Goat versus Fish? You fishy accusation. Fishy accusation.
No.
I did just say that. I did. And I'll say it again. All fence sitters are indecisive. Therefore, all fence sitters are fish.
Fence sitters, all fence sitters are fish. You are just being rebuffed by fish. Just rebuffed with the verses that you are a fish. You see the fence sitter, it can fence it out, but it cannot take it. It can say it can declare stench, it can just declare this versus or that versus. You can say you are a true fence sitter, you are not a true fence sitter. But as soon as you start accusing it of being a fish, it has nothing to say for itself but to laugh and to dismiss.
This isn't right.
This isn't right. Oh. I do not like when they call me a fish. Fence sitters.
I don't know about that. Fish definitely have a lot to do with fences, sir. Fish are going to play both sides. They're going to figure out which side is going to be least vulnerable for them, and that's the path they're going to choose, but they need to make sure that they keep all their options open.
The verses just keep coming. They seem much more clever than you, fence sitter. We can say this is Goat versus Fish. Much more clever than you.
The fence is higher than you think, okay?
How high is the fence? How high is the fence?
It's higher than any fish can jump. How dare you?
Ooh, higher than the fish, higher than the leaping fish. But you remember that was a goat that left you a message, the high goat on the mountain of the goat.
Fish milk is gonna be hands down stinkier than goat's milk. I will give it that. But goats fucking stink.
Well, you have a versus for fish milk. Perhaps you are smelling fish milk.
Goats stink. Goats totally stink.
There is the verses. At long versus the admission of the fence sitter. At long versus the admission of the fence sitter. It is okay to stink. It is okay to stink. Goat and fish, we smell like goat versus fish. We smell like goat versus fish. Have you ever smelled goat versus fish? Smell yourself now. Smell yourself now. You smell like you have been listening to Goat versus Fish for many hours. Next verses, it will come up to you and it will say, wow, you look so pleasant. You look so wise. You look like you just have a great, splendid aura of wisdom about you. Oh, what is your secret? What is your secret? And you will say, Goat versus Fish. It is the stench of goat versus fish. There should be goat versus fish perfume. Oh, the goat versus fish. Yes, you too can smell like goat versus fish. Yes, attract goat and fish with the stench of goat versus fish.
Victor, I need to know, if you piled a whole pile of dead carcasses of goats, and you also had a pile of dead carcasses that are fish, which is typically what you get that very potent smell from, which do you think would smell worse? The pile of carcassed goat or the pile of carcassed fish?
A pile of carcass fish would easily stink, but there could easily be more goats, even though the fish are more stinky.
So you say a piled high goat, just one goat piled high on top of another to make a dead goat mountain or some such verses. A mountain of dead goat.
Yeah,
a sea of dead fish.
There could be many goats, but fish stink. I mean, they just overpower. It doesn't mean there are more fish. It just means they're stinkier.
Y'all must be retarded, I swear to God. Got Victor fucking Martinez and cat versus fish, dog, whatever, nigga.
Goat versus fish, the very brick of the wall, the wall that is a fence. If it is not Brandon Bricks, Hello to you, Brandon Bricks, hello to you. What did it say about you and Goat versus Fish? That we were some sort of that there was some sort of retardation about Goat versus Fish? Is this what they said of Goat versus Fish? Fence sitter, can you continue the verses? It is up to you. We know it has been a long verses. Can you continue the verses? It is up to you.
It takes a certain level of retardation to accept whether you are goat or fish. Are you goat or are you fish? It's a simple question.
It is a simple question. Brandon Bricks, welcome again to Goat versus Fish. Brandon Bricks, we know this one since before it began. This one, too, has been on the Goat vs. Fish podcast, and now it comes to Goat vs. Fish, and it wishes to make fences and be all fancy and offensive to Goat vs. Fish. Brandon Bricks, you are always welcome with Goat vs. Fish, but stop throwing bricks at Goat vs. Fish. Stop throwing your bricks at Goat vs. Fish.
I don't have fish tits, but I do have fish sticks.
Fish sticks. No fish tits, but yes, two fish sticks. Celebrations for your fish sticks. Celebration for your fish sticks.
Motherfucker say he got COVID and he can't smell his own fart. Shut up. Ah.
Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? It is a simple verses. You are calling in and you are beginning to just listen to what the others have to say, and now you are throwing bricks at them. Brandon Bricks, have you forgotten that this is Goat versus Fish with Victor Jr. Martinez? Have you forgotten that this is Goat versus Fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Victor Jr. Martinez, you have found this brand on bricks at what you were calling the Garage Mike many verses ago. What do you have to say about this one?
I think he's a goat. He's got a lot of goat tendencies. It's easy to say, whether or not you're fishy when you're a goat. I don't know what it is.
Brandon Briggs.
Hey, Victor, I have a question. Do you like fish sticks?
And there's one. Okay. I like fish, but compared to goat,
continue.
Tonight, it's hard to tell who's winning. It's hard to tell who's winning. I don't know who's gonna come out on top. I know it's not fence sitters.
No, trust and believe. I will, as soon as this 2-year-old child wakes up, I will ask her, is she a goat or a fish? And she will let you know. The only issue is she tends to repeat whatever the last word is. So we'll have to negotiate and make sure we say fish last and goat last and see which one she picks.
Celebration, that is a wise verses. That is a wise verses. And we will mark your verses. We will hold you to that verses. Machete Queen. It is the most holding verses you have ever seen. Yes, the next verses we are speaking, we will ask to know. We will ask to know if it chose fish or if it chose goat. And yes, you may ask it, are you goat or fish? You may ask it, are you fish or goat? Wise verses. Perhaps that would work on Victor Jr. Martinez. Are you fish or goat?
It's hard to tell. You want to know what they really are. You really want to know. You don't want to have any influence. You just want to know what you're raising. And I'm raising a goat. I'm okay with that. We'll see. Machete. We'll see.
Goats smell like an amalgamation of all of the other farm animals' shit on the farm that they live on. It's not earthy, it's literal shit.
You have heard it. We are really getting down into the dirty verses. Shit-smelling goat smells as all the other fence sitters on the farm. Wow, just rolling around in its own verses. Oh, goat versus fish. Goat, we still accept you, smelly goat. We always accept you, whether you're goat or fish. We accept all goat and fish.
One fish is stronger than a smelly goat. I'll tell you that.
Fence sitter. Oh, I'm even. I am unbiased, unequivocal in my verses.
Do you like fish tits? Well, if you do, you're a horny fish.
We have heard of horny goat. Yes. Horny goat. The horny goat. And a horned fish. If you like fish sticks, you are a horned fish. Have you ever seen a horned fish? Thank you for that verses. Chris Fumisgali. Welcome again to Goat versus Fish.
Is the sea not natural? That's my question. The sea is definitely natural. I think it's possible that you're just much more connected to the earth, and so you think of that as natural. I'd be curious to see how much earth is in your birth chart.
Well, Goat versus Fish, as for your verse chart, that is a versus for a fence sitter to answer. Goat versus Fish knows not fish from goat for that versus. Fence sitter, what do you have to say to this?
I don't know about my earth chart. I'd like to say that I was born in the middle. I don't know much. I that's something out of my depth. I don't know if I was born in the earth chart or the fish chart. I don't know.
We have been trying to explain this to this fence sitter that thinks, skywalking goat, that thinks that it is right there in the center of the fence, when really it is leaning one versus or another, and it just thinks that what it perceives is the unbalanced versus. It does not know how off kilter it is. It does not know. But we have 5 more. We are getting through the verses. It is a celebration. Maybe take a verses. Victor Jr. Martinez, may we have a versus just to celebrate all who have made such excellent contribution to this mighty versus of Victor Martinez and Goat versus Fish. This has been an epic versus, truly.
Epic verse. I think goats are winning. This has been an amazing verse.
Victor Martinez, fish confirmed. Welcome to the team, babe. Welcome to the team.
Don't you dare!
Victor Martinez.
No.
Victor Martinez was confirmed for fish. Oh, Victor Martinez at long versus was confirmed for fish. Oh, celebration.
This fence has no gills. How dare
Celebration
you?
for fish. Celebration for fish. Oh, yes. It was a fence sitter for so long. But it was confirmed for fish in this song.
Who are you, Itzano? Who are you?
And as it takes another rip from its bong to get higher on the fence, even though they said it was fish, to get higher on the fence. Oh, how we wish it were true, how we wish it were true that it were a fish, and, well, or a goat, of course. But no. Goat versus fish, as much as we would like to sing in celebration that Victor Martinez Jr. is a fish, we will do you this versus, Victor Martinez Jr. It is for you, of course it is for you, to declare if you are a goat or a fish.
You damn right it is. Let's see what these verses say.
Fish don't think for themselves as often as goats do. So, I mean, if you're like a proud fence sitter, I would say, like, I'm a fence sitter, but I'm trying to not be. Or like he's saying I'm not on the fence or whatever. I don't know. I'm trying to not be a fence sitter. I'm trying to be a goat or a fish. I'm reluctantly a blend. Me and all my girls are all a blend because we're authentic to ourselves, and we're gonna, there's light, there's dark, there's goat, there's fish. It exists simultaneously. They don't negate one another. But I will agree with Nail that sitting on the fence, or at least gatekeeping a fence, is more like something a fish would do than a goat, because goats like to climb and do different stuff, and they're not like trying to make sure other people, they don't really care about fences and stuff. They care more about mountains. I feel like Victor is likely a fish in denial.
How dare you? Queen Machete is clearly a fish, trying to gain more fish followers.
Interesting verses. It is a versus of goat versus fish, for when the goat are triumphing over the fish will often go to the fence and coax the fence sitter into joining 14 fish. Goat are known to do this as well. Classic verses, get that fence sitter off the fence to join you as goat or fish, so you can versus the fish or the goat. So you accuse Queen Machete of being a fish that is trying to recruit you to fish so that you versus the goat.
Yeah, like, I'm on the fence and I can see all your fish qualities. How dare you?
And the reason I feel that Victor is in denial is because it may be difficult to accept that you're a fish, and the verses of the stench applies to you, and you literally embody the verses of the stench of fish. And the fish and the fence, they both start with F. So there's just a lot of different things that would indicate that Victor is more likely to be a fish than he is to be a goat. And if you have to choose, also, is there proof of this fence? Like, where's the fence?
I don't need to prove there's a fence. Okay, there's a fence. Oh my gosh, I am baffled. Anyone who's been on the fence knows there's a fence. I do not have to prove there's a fence. Oh my God.
Listen, I'm a goat. I'm just saying that maybe smell isn't really going to be a deciding factor here, considering that both animals smell like asshole.
Oh, no, there is a goat. Now, there is a nuanced verses from the goat. It is saying, it is a goat, It says that it smells like asshole. That was the verses that you used yourself, because you said both goat and fish do. But you say, this will not be the deciding verses. There is something beyond the verses of the stench that will truly decide the verses of goat versus fish. And we are here to tell you that though this is a very stinky verses, this is a very stinky verses of goat versus fish, or at least it has become one. It is certainly not the only verses. It is certainly not the only verses of goat versus fish. Perhaps the stench will fade away. Perhaps the stench will fade away, and we will have a verses anew, and we will have a verses of new. It all depends on this next verses.
Okay. Further evidence, since we're talking about how high fences are. A goat, according to the magical interwebs, can jump at least 5 feet high, depending on the species of goat, variety of goat. But a salmon, which is a fish, can jump up to 12 feet. Therefore, fish claim superiority in the jumping category. Fence sitter.
Amazing verses, astounding verses. Look at this, look at this. Going to the intro webs and discovering new secret knowledge of goat and fish. Celebration.
It's true. All right. Fishes understand the height of fences more than a goat, perhaps. But goats naturally understand heights. I mean, have you seen a goat just go to heights? There is no recorded heights of a goat. I mean, oh gosh. It's just hard to explain as a fence sitter, but
you do not have the verses. You have never been a goat or a fish, so when you start speaking of goat and fish, it is barely intelligible to goat and fish. Thank you for this research into goat and fish. You will find, if you start researching goat and fish and goat versus fish, you will find many interesting verses about goat and fish.
Have you ever heard of a sea goat? That's also like an earth sign. But it's a sea goat. I think you should look it up, and I want to know what you feel about this.
Say we. Welcome to Goat versus Fish. Welcome to Goat versus Fish. A sea goat. Now, a goat can go to the sea. A goat must go to the sea too, versus the fish of the sea. It can go to the lake as well. It is all part of the sea of the fish. The sea goat. If you are speaking, we have heard of a sea horse. Now that is a horse of different verses. That truly is offensive to be true. But as far as a sea goat, if you are speaking of that Capricorn again, goat versus fish insist. Goat versus fish do insist. It is just a fence sitter by another name. It is a perennial fence sitter. Have you heard of sea goat?
I've never heard of such a thing. The line between sea and fish and goat is getting really blurry, but I must remain on the fence. No one understands the height of the fence. I'm on the fence.
Say we. If that is how you call your verses, please follow Goat versus Fish and Victor Martinez. Thank you for contributing this late verses to Goat versus Fish.
Also, what do you think about Old Greg? I don't know if you know who that is. You should look it up. It's a fish man.
I'm Old Greg! That is what Goat versus Fish heard. Goat versus Fish was out there in the verses of the mighty Goat versus Fish. And Old Greg was there, and Goat versus Fish went to speak to it. Went to speak to Old Greg and to ask it, are you goat? Or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? And then it revealed something to Goat versus Fish. It revealed something to Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish would dare not speak of it. We do not know if Old Greg is a goat or a fish, but we know the verses of which you speak. We know the verses of which you speak. Ooh, Old Greg, is it goat or fish? We do not know. We do not know.
Victor is definitely a fish because he is showing quite a few Libran characteristics by clinging to that fence so tightly. And everyone knows that Libra is simply the Pisces of the air signs. So he is 100% a fish because Pisces are fish.
That's not right, Skywalker. You can't just say that about me. That's not right.
Oh, wait. I feel like the verses of the stench is a distraction created by fence sitters who are really fish, because that was established earlier. Because most people would rather be a goat than a fish, because the archetype of goat is stronger than the archetype of fish. However, fish are more spiritual and have a more spiritual connotation than goats do. He kept bringing up the earthly goats, yes. And he said fish are otherworldly. Little does he know, he's got a bunch of astro hoes, and he's right, because a goat is an earth sign and Pisces is a water sign, but is related to Neptune. So he's not wrong in that. But how would a fish know that how would a goat know that a fish was an alien? A fish would be more likely to know that a fish is from Neptune. So this is all furthermore evidence that he is not a fence sitter.
Okay, fish aren't earthly. Okay, fair enough. Fish may be unearthly, but that doesn't mean that I'm a fish. All right, I'm still in the middle. Come on.
We do not know of this fish unearthly. Yes, we know the earth is the land of the goat, but is the earth not a combination of the land of the goat and the sea of the fish? Yes. When we celebrate Earth Day, we celebrate the land of the goat and the sea of the fish. May Goat versus Fish just say, let us always strive to protect the land of the goat and the sea of the fish, so that goat and fish may forever versus with goat versus fish.
He's not a fence sitter. He's just near the fence to gatekeep for some reason. Now, I haven't understood the motive besides not wanting to be a bitch-ass fish. You know what I'm saying? But I just feel like no respect to Victor. I mean, no disrespect. No disrespect to him. Because I'm a blend. But just own your fish, own your stench. If you keep bringing up the verses of the stench, then that verses belongs to your personal stench. Deep within you, probably in your butt crack from sitting on the fence.
Okay, all right.
Ooh, laying down the verses.
Maybe it's a stinky fence, but it's not quite like a fishy fence. Oh my goodness. I am in the middle. I'm in the middle. There's no fishy fence. There's a earthy goat fish fence.
Goat versus fish was just live on stereo. There's no more verses to go. We answered them all. We answered all of the questions for Goat versus Fish and Victor Martinez the Fence. Now you should follow Goat versus Fish. Now you should follow Victor Martinez. Thank you for joining with Goat versus Fish. For a versus as this would not have been the same versus without you, not without you, not without you. And Goat versus Fish. Where can you come and where can you go? What can you see? What can you show? How can you learn and how can you grow? Does anyone even know? No. Does anyone even know? With Goat versus Fish. Thank you for joining Goat versus Fish, for joining Goat versus Fish.
Oh my goodness. I am so glad that everyone understood the verses this evening. I think there have been goat. I think there have been fish. I don't know if there have been any real fence sitters. But
Ooh.
I'm glad that we did this.
This was an amazing versus. This was a truly amazing versus. It began a bit wondering when will be the goat and fish, but then special verses to Queen Machete for bringing those goat and fish. We are glad that, what did you call them? We are glad that you and your fellow Astro Hose did make it to this versus of goat versus fish. Before we leave, shall we give this one final versus?
Yes, please.
Yeah, nobody wants to be a fence sitter. They would rather be both, or they would rather be a goat or a fish. That's on you.
I'm a fence sitter. I want to be a fence sitter. How dare you? I have a spine. And I want to be a fence sitter. It's not for everyone.
Well, fence sitter, you invited Goat vs. Fish to be part of this versus, so let us give you the final verses. Just remember to always follow Goat vs. Fish on all social media at Goat vs. Fish. Go to GoatVsFish.com to find all the linkages to Goat vs. Fish, especially on Twitch. If you want to see and perceive what does Goat vs. Fish even look like, yes, you can perceive Goat vs. Fish on twitch.tv/Goat vs. Fish. Follow Goat vs. Fish. And if you want a merch of Goat vs. Fish, a shirt of Goat vs. Fish, you can find these things and more at GoatVsFish.com/store. Celebration. We give the verses to you, Victor Jr. Martinez.
This has been amazing. I'm so glad to have the verses on here. I sincerely hope the verses continues, and just go out there and see what the verses is every single night, and we will be back. We'll be back perhaps next week, perhaps in 2 weeks. I don't know. We will be back to see what the verses is between the true fence sitter Victor Martinez, and the versus Goat versus Fish.
Well, what if we said, for those who are listening, what if we committed to doing the same verses next week? What if we just said we shall do it again on next Tuesday versus at 7:35? What if we just did that versus Pacific Standard Time?
I don't see why not. We will be back. This versus is not over. The versus never ends.
The verse never ends. And though we verses, we still become friends. Celebration. We shall see you. And if you follow Goat vs. Fish and Victor Martinez here on the stereo and on the social media, of course, we shall be posting to let you know when shall be this next verses, what shall be this next verses. Thank you again for joining Goat vs. Fish. And it was written.
I think the G versus S should continue. Please just jump on, see what the versus is, even without a fence sitter mediating. Just please versus. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. We shall do this. Shall we see you next versus?
Next versus, we will see you.
Celebration.